Oh, yeah, we need to ease it. Yeah, and I might. Are you a good secretary like stress? Yeah. They started to what? What is that? Some macrame? No, oh my god, that's a touch screen. Blingy, blingy, girl. You do? Oh, that's. Oh, what were the Valentines? Didn't read the second and third one. What were they? Yeah. Okay.
There's another board here.
Remember this? Remember this? Amy, what's that graph called?
Y x cubed.
That is x cubed. Yes. Does anybody else know that? Is it x cubed? Yeah. This is our math teacher. She knows this is x cubed. Hi. How was lunch? Are you still eating?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was gonna have us do like a physical activity, but we can wait till we're done. How are you? How's your energy? Are you tired?
I'm tired.
You're tired?
I need a stretch.
Why don't you stand up? Seriously. Like if you're tired, if you're eating, stay seated. If you're standing, if you're tired, just stand up and we're gonna have just a quick chit chat first. Tisa, hi. Let's see. Make sure the volume is up. And I want to give you a better view than just my crotch. I'll give you us three. Okay. So if you're standing, make room for yourself so you can swing your arms. Let's just get the blood flowing a little bit. And we're going to start with a quick review about the sutra. So first thing, top of the head, what was the most interesting thing that you learned about the sutra talk? Vrittis? Who say vrittis? Y'all know that word? Vrittis. Get that in your mouth. And then Tisa, if you want to pop in, you can, by the way, just to interrupt. Yeah. Did you like the book club?
Yeah.
Did it make sense?
I did. I like the higher mind and the lower mind. I don't know the exact words for it, but that's what I would call it in the teaching of.
The higher mind and the lower mind. Does anybody remember what that's called?
Like from the body to the
Purusha and Prakriti. So Purusha is like pure spirit. Right, yeah.
Higher self.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the opposite of Purusha? What is there like a flip side of Purusha's coin?
It's not really like that. No. Let me think about that. That's a great question. Yeah. Why? Why do you ask that? Oh, like devil kind of thing? God devil? I see. So I guess in Eastern philosophy, yeah, and make any movements you want. Reba's breaking the mold. She's the first one to go Sahaj on us. Go Sahaj, buds! Okay.
Well, yeah.
Full Sahaj. So I think in like yoga,
Ignorance.
I think ignorance and evil do exist, but it's it's an interesting thing because a lot of times the devil, well, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because even in Christianity, a lot of times the devil's misinterpreted, right? Because you can read, unless a lot of mystic schools read the devil as like the most servile angel, right? He got sent to hell because God told him love people. And he said, no, I will only love you. You're the only thing worth loving. And God said, well, now you're disobeying, so go to hell, right? And that's the definition of hell, is being separated from the thing that's beloved to you, right? Well, I don't know. There's not always direct crossover from the East and West in that way, because whereas like the main commandments for West is like thou shalt. And in the East, it's less about being commanded and more about I am, like becoming, right? Okay, what else do you like or get? Sorry if that didn't answer it at all, but
Samsara.
samsara. Yeah, what is samsara? I'm gonna lift my legs.
Layering memories, layering on top, on top, on top.
Wait.
Samskara.
Oh, samskara,
I'm sorry, samskara.
which there is a word samsara. So samskara, we can always remember because it's like scars, right? Like it layers scars. Samsara is what?
The wheel of reincarnation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's the wheel of perpetual suffering, right?
I love that.
You're in it, by the way. Well, how's the ride going? Woo! Put your arms up. So samskara, samsara, vrittis, karma. What else?
The gunas.
The gunas are super important. The gunas are like, I like to think of sometimes like the Three Stooges, right? You have rajas. What's rajas? Like frenetic energy. Yes, active energy. Tamas is what? Larry Moe. Yeah, dark, torpid. And then curly is
Larry.
yeah, Sava is what?
Light.
So it's like light, intelligence, clarity, luminescence. Yeah. Yep. And we're gonna talk more about Sava today. Okay. So you got through the first 16, correct? Does anybody remember Sutra 2, 1.2? Ooh! Bam! Let's all say it. Yogas, Chitta, Vritti, Narodaha. Yeah, means yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind, right? Or the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. Okay. Anybody remember 1.4? No? Oh, that's one you should probably remember too. I'm gonna leave that there. Do you remember it, you guys?
The practice that becomes from the drowning.
No, in Sanskrit. Start with Sanskrit.
I can't find it.
Oh, it's that book is hard for that. That's right.
Where is
We
it?
didn't do this on script for 1.5. Just
It's a little bit
1.1
weird
and
that
2.
it's not in there.
What's 1.1? Atta. What does atta mean?
Now.
Now? What's the rest of the shloka? Atta, yoga, anushasanam. Anushasanam. Yeah. Okay. So the sweet 16 are cool, huh? What did you think of 1.12, 1.13, 1.14? What was 1.12?
Was that the one about non-attachment, like?
Close.
Where it really hit?
Ah, not quite. Not quite. What one are you thinking of?
I don't know, but I know that it really hit me when I was reading it.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. What do you got there, Alexis?
Just helping her get to the page.
It's on
where it
295.
shows the Sanskrit.
What is Sanskrit for 1.4?
Oh, 1.4 is Vritti Sar.
Oh, 1.3, sorry.
Oh dear. Okay. Tata Rastu Svarupe
Vastanam.
Avastanam.
Vastanam. Taras Farupe. Now I don't even remember how to say it because you're saying it so creatively. Tara, Svarupe. So Tara, like in Tadasana. Think about Tara, right? Tara means here it is, right?
And then-
Svarupa is like the special aspect of the
Well, it
self.
says Drastu first.
Oh, Drastu. So,
Sada, Drastu.
so here it is. When we are in communion, when we are in the drishti of, when we're in the gaze of, or the perception of the real self, Svarupa. Yeah. And then what's it go on to say?
Wait.
Tada Drastu.
You still didn't say Drastu, did you?
I tried to.
Okay. So Drastu says the seer is the pure consciousness that comprehends all objects.
Yeah. So here's the key to this. 1.2 and 1.3 are kind of like keys to each other. 1.2 is like when yoga is accomplished, this is what happens. The mind gets still. But then there's something that happens that precedes that. And we are a witness to the true self.
Right, okay.
That's the key. And that's Svarupa. So 1.3, 1.2 is like kind of the dangling carrot, right? That gets you to like, I'm doing yoga to still my mind. I'm doing yoga to get to Nirodha. You get to Nirodha, you might be thinking to yourself, well, what happens? Well, what happens is when the mind is still from the vrittis, remember, the vrittis are like distortions on the water. If we're trying to look at the moon and study the moon, and the water is rippled, we're getting distorted perspective of it. Once the vrittis are clear, the water is clear and smooth. We get an accurate reflection of the moon in this metaphor being the true self, right? No? Yes? Why not? Okay. So 1.12, what was that one?
Is it the dispassion practice?
Close. Yeah. Yeah. So 112 through 114 are probably some of the most important ones regarding your sadhana moving forward. So 112 is talking about two aspects that make up yoga. One is abhyasa and one is vairagya, right? What is abhyasa and vairagya? Yeah. So yeah. Was this the one?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, and it's defined sometimes as detachment or non-attachment or whatever, but like the important thing is, I love the metaphor that Iyengar is kind of famous for using, that yoga takes flight with the two wings of practice and detachment. So it's really interesting because we don't get that early on in our yoga training. A lot of times we get practice part of it, but a lot of times practice is very performative and it's very much directed towards, oh, I'm trying to work out my low back, or I'm trying to get hamstrings. Even though these are kind of small order attachments, they're still attachments nonetheless. It's a pretty radical thing to say, hey, you should come to yoga, and by the way, leave your attachments at the door. Well, I got a million other better things to do than not be like, on my hustle. You know what I mean? Like, we are such hustle culture, and it's so hard for us to get our brains around doing something that doesn't have direct results, that doesn't benefit me. And I think that is a really great thing for us to start to wrap our brain around, is that like this question of, is there anything that you do in your life that you do for purely the thing without being attached to the outcome? Like, for instance, those of you who are parents, if your kid doesn't grow up to be who you want them to be, will you still love them? So that's not attachment in action, right? Now, there are people who are like, no, I'm not going to love that kid. That's sad. And that may be an extreme example, but it's an interesting flip on non-attachment, because it doesn't mean you don't care. It just means that your association to the practice is unconditional. Does that make sense? It's a little bit different than just being like, whatever happens, happens. Actually, no. The idea is that when he goes on to define practice in the proceeding, is that right? The sutras after that? I'm trying to sound smart, people. Please give me a break. He goes on to say, what is practice defined by? 3 things. What are the 3 things that deem a really worthy practice?
Commitment, time, and
Enthusiasm.
So consistency is what I would change that word commitment to. Yeah. So it's consistency. So showing up time and time and time again over a long period of time. And the third one we'll get to in a minute, but those 2 first things are really important, because it's important to understand that yoga is unlike a lot of things that we're trying to achieve in our modern world. And even contemporary yoga falls prey to this a lot of times, where it's like trying to get you the solution really, really fast, right? Like, let's heal the wound really, really fast. And there's some wisdom in allowing yourself to heal in a natural evolution and process of time. If you were suffering something and I just gave you a pill and you felt better, would you learn anything from that? Would you gain anything from that journey? You'd feel better, which is usually just what we want, because that's kind of what we've been trained to think, that we should all just feel better. It's a kind of a unconscious or inherent entitlement we have, that we shouldn't just be suffering. But there's beauty in suffering, right? It's part of life. Like, we equivocate love based on how deeply we do suffer. We can only define one thing by its opposite in the world. Like, if I'm to say, oh, it's hot out, what is that compared to the sun? No. Compared to a cold day on planet Earth, right? It's hot. So we we are all the time, without even thinking about it, defining things by their relative opposites. So consistency over a long period of time is just something you have to accept. Again, going back to this question of like trusting the process. When we say trust process, it's not necessarily saying like trust us, but trust this 5,000-year-old lineage that's saying like, you know, if you really want to reap the benefits, if you really want the fruits of the yoga, well, you just get to be patient. Going back to the Bible quote today, love is kind, love is patient. That's as far as I got, right?
Okay, so I have a question. So we're not supposed to be attached to the outcome of doing yoga. However, we are kind of led to believe, right, that by reading what we're reading, that if we do it.
Can you hear this,
results
Tisa?
will come. Do you know what I mean? That idea that you will get, if we want spiritual growth,
Yeah.
that if we do this, there will be spiritual growth. So I'm not saying attached to specific.
That's a great position. What you're saying right there. Don't get attached to being like, I want it to be this thing.
Right.
But so here's the third part of that. The other sutra is practice succeeds when it is done consistently over a long period of time. And there's this third word. Can you look up the Sanskrit for this?
I asked, did you record?
Why would I do that?
This was.
I don't know.
Oh, I am. Oh my God. It's a good day. I'm recording. Seriously. No, please clap. I would be mad. It's going to ruin your day. So does anybody remember the English translation in it? He said consistency, enthusiasm. Okay. So this is a good diving off point. It's not bad. It gets us close. But again, remember, English language is limited because the purpose of English language is to be definite, be definitive, right? Sanskrit is liminal. What's the difference between limited and liminal? Limited has boundaries and thresholds. Liminal goes above and beyond the threshold. So what's the difference between something that's trying to be definitive? Well, it's trying to say exactly what it is conceptually, whereas Sanskrit is trying to really represent not just a part of the thing, but the whole thing itself with the word.
I have the word too.
Yeah, what is the word?
Satkara,
Satkara. What does sat mean?
right?
Truth, yes. Do you remember from Kundalini, Kara?
No, I didn't have that. I just remember Satnam.
Okay, Kara. So Satkara means like, well, enthusiasm is what Carrera says, right? And I like that because like entheos, to be filled with God, right? But I think that really what you want to start thinking about is like, what is this devotion? Like, I don't want to be attached to the outcome being a specific thing, but what is the carrot at the end of the stick, right? And what is motivating me to do my sadhana? Is it something that I'm chasing or is it something I'm running from, right? So a lot of times with desire, we talk about the carrot or the stick. Like the carrot's the thing we're chasing and the stick is the thing we're running from. Question?
Well, it's more of just like how I was seeing it in here. It translates sought to right and cur to do. So to do right or to practice truth.
Yes.
That's not an attachment to anything.
Yes.
Or maybe it's an attachment to practice truth, but that's not the outcome. You're just working towards
I love
practicing
that.
truth, and that could, to you, practicing truth would be going through the spiritual journey.
So to do right.
I think in my mind, it's like neutrality. Like I don't care either way, whatever happens. If I come to yoga class and I feel great or I don't, it doesn't matter. I just know it's what's best for me.
That's powerful. That's a good dedication. That's devotion.
That's neutrality. I try to live everything from neutrality.
So I would like you all to think about this concept of satkara. Like, what is the bhavana behind your satkara when you practice? What is the thing that's going to keep you filled with God to show up on the practice mat consistently over a long period of time? You know? So hopefully we'll get a little bit more clarity around what that is today. Okay. So we've got a lot of work to do. I had a question. Well, let's start with this. Let's start with this graph, my x cubed graph, okay? I don't know if you can see that at all. Kinda. Okay, I mean, it's pretty basic. Yeah. All right. So this S should be an A. This represents asana. And this downward facing slope leads to suffering. Okay? So this is just the general kind of momentum of life. If we do nothing, we slide down to suffering, deeper and deeper into suffering. Imagine, if you will, a young person talking to somebody and saying, hey, blah, 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 I'm suffering this. Well, you should come try yoga. You try yoga, all of a sudden, something hits, it like feels better. This is what asana can do, right? It can lift us out of suffering to an extent. Thus, this is the platform, right? This is the plateau. This C represents comfort, right? So this is a lot of times when people are kind of young in their yoga practice, they think this is the entire relationship with yoga. Is that like, oh, life wasn't so great, I started doing yoga and it made things better. And as far as so many people get, is just what they think of as better is just getting to a place of comfort. It's like, I'm suffering, I'm uncomfortable, I do some asana, I'm comfortable. I know that this is an oversimplification, but yoga in kind of historical terms was taught two ways. It was taught for spiritual kind of growth and maturity, and then it was also taught therapeutically. Nowadays, it's thought of, even though it's more unconscious, it's thought of as more of a therapeutic practice. Most people get prescribed by their physical therapist, go do yoga if your hamstring hurts, or you're recovering from ACL surgery, or you've got a tight back, or you know what I mean? You're suffering from something, it'll alleviate something. Is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not, right? I think this graph is really important because it just shows that if that's the extent of our yoga practice, we leave a lot on the table. So what's on the table? What's on this other side? That S could represent sadhana. It could represent spirituality. Yeah, okay? But you notice something interesting about this graph is that, like, if you stop doing asana, do you think you stay here? You go back this way. But if you only do asana, it's really tough to get past that point. But if you do sadhana, damn it, this feels really a lot like this. This doesn't feel much different than that. And in some ways, because we're giving up our comfort willfully to go into suffering again, into discomfort, that's a real heavy trip to accept. Does this make sense? I'm saying why it's so unique that you are embarking on what you're embarking on. Like, normal people don't do this. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me ask you this. Do you know what spiritual bypass is?
Mhm.
What is it?
Well, for me.
Quickly define.
It's when life gets hard and I don't address the issue. Instead, I would try to go around it for me.
Yeah.
Just say, everything's as it's supposed to be, I'm fine. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
So a perfect example would be maybe you've got a problem in your life. Say you fight with your partner. You go to yoga, you feel better.
Yeah.
You don't resolve the issue with your partner. You fight with your partner. You go to yoga. This is this cycle. This becomes spiritual bypass, right? So it's kind of imperative that if we want to break this first kind of repetitious wheel of samsara, that we need to get brave enough to begin a spiritual practice. Spiritual practice takes courage because you're going into the unknown, you're doing the hard thing, and by the way, it's not sexy, it's not cool, you're not getting paid for it, you're being asked to let go of the freaking outcome. Like, what is the use, right? It's really unintuitive, and it's not something that a lot of us have been trained for. If you look at the bioevolutionary kind of history of our nervous system and our hardwiring, you have 250,000 years of, I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to not get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. right? That is all this, by the way. That is all this first stage. Holy shit, I almost died there. Whew, I'm in a cave now with a fire and I've got a big stick in case something comes along, right? It's, the yogis were some of the first to figure out, I mean, definitely the Vedas, where kind of yoga comes from, that is the oldest spiritual text written down in the world that we have record to, right? Still, it's 5,000 years old, and that's much older than, the Bible, the Quran, the Old Testament. But these folks, these yogis, these sages, they were trying to figure out, okay, when we get this figured out, is this all there is to life?
That's
Right?
where I'm at right now. What are we doing? Why we just get calm and then what?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm bored.
Finish, yeah. So exactly. So you figure out how to get healthy enough, the therapeutic aspect, to complete the stress cycle. It looks like what you're talking about. You go, what now? You go, what now? So, the stress cycle is a threat comes along, you go into fight or flight or freeze, which is, we'll put an asterisk next to that. And then if you survive, sometimes you get stuck in the stress cycle because it's, I don't want to use this term lightly, but it can traumatize, you can scar you. Okay, you can create a samskara that you just get stuck. That vritti just keeps going. I'm never really safe. I'm always threatened. I'm always threatened. I'm always threatened. But if you really do the work around it to heal, learn, and grow, you get to a point where the clouds kind of break. You see a different perspective. There's a new horizon. But we don't have the evolutionary hardwiring in us to recognize it.
So are you looking to add in controlled stressors then to continue your growth? Is that what
Well,
you're saying?
absolutely. I mean, yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Humans adapt to stress. Yeah. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when we see that new horizon, we need a map. We need a map to figure out, where am I going? And by the way, the map also shows us, how to get there, but what there is. Because for most of our history as humans, all we've cared about is surviving. And it's taken a long time to get to the point where we actually kind of believe it. Like, oh, I'm actually safe. I can stop sweating now. I can stop overreacting to emails. I can stop honking at the little lady who cut me off on the street going, get away, grandma, or whatever it is, right? Like, I'm safe. It's okay. So now what? I need a map. And that's the point of, this Yoga Sutras. That's the point of the Bhagavad Gita. And I would argue that's what spirituality is. Spirituality is at the very basic, because, you can think of it as like this pie in the sky thing. And those of you who had me in 200 out, I don't like the word enlightenment, right? If you remember, I've got a real problem with that word. But I think spirituality, we need to start with the very practical aspect of it. And it just starts with, how do I live my life now? Now that I am safe, now that the people I love are safe, now that my basic needs are met, like if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, once those are met, and even he, in the 50s, he was famous for the pyramid of basic needs, but he spent the large majority of his career working on the pyramid of self-actualization. If you look at self-actualization, you map it onto Eastern philosophy. It's always funny because these Western psychologists, sociologists, philosophers come along, and they try to figure out, and they work so hard, Kierkegaard's, the Nietzsche's, they all do this work just to get not even close enough to what the yogis already figured out 5,000 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, I'm serious. If you take a deep dive into Western philosophy, Western philosophy is still not there. They're still just kind of like at the foothill of the mountain that the yogis climbed a long, long time ago. Yeah, spirituality is about growth, healing, learning, and it starts with just the next step. Yeah.
So you don't it doesn't become ambivalence, right? Like what I'm hearing is I'm bored. It's like ambivalence. I don't care what happens. You kind of elevate to I almost feel like I worry about other people more now. And I don't want to say worry because that's not the word I mean. But it's like
you're more considerate?
Yeah.
Or
like
conscientious
I hurt for people.
Oh, so empathy. Empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to get that into our vocabulary, right? Sympathy is like understanding somebody who's suffering and feeling bad for their suffering. Empathy is actually like feeling into their and going, like, oh, I can sense what that feels like. I may not know what it's like because my dad hasn't died, but your dad died. But I can feel something of how bad you're feeling. Now, compassion is where we want to direct it eventually, because compassion means, well, literally, come means with, and passion to suffer, to suffer with, right? This is why Jesus was such a yogi, because he took action, and that's all compassion is empathy in action, like taking action for the suffering of the world. And I believe that's what you're doing as yoga teachers. I mean, you're not on Jesus level, sorry, but
But is that like the next step? Like,
oh yeah.
So like I'm saying,
So
I'm bored, and now I care about
yeah,
the world.
yeah. I mean, a lot of what this feels like when you start to get to this upslope is everything you were trying to avoid here, and it's really annoying because here things hurt, and then you get to a point where it doesn't hurt anymore. To get to here requires sattva. What happens with sattva? Things light up. Well, what lights up? My clarity and my awareness. So I'm more aware of people suffering. So that makes me more sensitive. But wait, I thought I was getting stronger, but the feeling of it, that's the interesting thing. That's the weird paradox of spiritual maturity. The stronger you get spiritually, the more you will feel suffering in the world. And it will feel like you are actually weaker. But it just means that you can take more of it on. Yeah? That's why I want to really put a big warning sign around the sadhana work, because these are potent techniques you're going to be learning. And you're going to be kind of in 3 phases during this next 9 months with your sadhana. You're going to be in your growth zone, you're going to be in your maintenance zone, and you're going to be in your regression zone. All 3 are perfectly fine. All 3 are perfectly normal, and all 3 are perfectly necessary. You will not be able to maintain growth in every aspect of your spiritual identity for all 9 months. And you will not be able to avoid regression, because it is the regression, it is the falling back down that gets us inspired to get, it's kind of like American Ninja Warrior. You know what I mean? When they like run and they try to get the thing and they slide down. But if they just started from right there again, they wouldn't have momentum, right? So you do sometimes have to take a step backward to take 2 more steps forward. That's just part of it. Yeah. So as somebody who's been doing this a long time and knows that, has been there, just have compassion for yourself, because there's going to be times where you're going to be really hard on yourself about this, because you're like, I'm doing the 300 hour, should be enlightened. That's not a thing. It's not a thing I've ever seen anybody achieve. Not saying Buddha and Jesus didn't, and whoever else. There are people who have, but it's harder now than ever. And that's part of the reason the gates are wide open with yoga. You look back 2,000 years ago, if you wanted to go study with a yoga master, it would require a very intensive pre-qualification initiative. You would probably live for 3 to 10 years with them, chopping wood, carrying water, before they may even take you on. And by the way, year 8, if they don't think you got it, they say, bye-bye. And there's no HR involved. You know what I mean? They don't have to explain it to anybody. There was a reason it was that way back then, and there's a reason it's the way it is now. I would say that if we're looking again at maps and myths that kind of guide the way we look at the narrative of the trajectory of our spirituality as a collective. And by the way, like when you get into the 8 limbs, are we all familiar with the 8 limbs of yoga? Somewhat. So in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, this book you're reading, you're going to read about the 8th limb. There's one in there that there should be a 9th limb, and that is Sangha, like his community. You cannot do this work alone. No student, this is the thing. It's in yoga, it's called paramparam. It means what I learn, I pass down to you, with the understanding that you will learn more than I will. You will go further. But also because of that privilege, it's incumbent to you to pass it on again. We keep passing it on. So the idea is that we should be broader in this front edge of the way in which we're moving yoga forward, so that it continues to serve more people, become more accessible, become more serviceable, and especially to that 9th limb, right? The community. Could you imagine like if the entire world did a yoga teacher training program, the way that it would change, because it's tough to change somebody's mind when they've got their mind made up, right? I've got my mind made up. Well, to change your mind would be like that's like coming in and kicking your sandcastle down, right? Nobody wants that. But yoga changes us all in from here, the heart. So that's what you're endeavoring on. That's what you're doing with this. So let's just spitball a couple of questions. The first question is, I want to say, why do you do asana, or have you done asana? Why has it been important to you? And then the follow-up question, and we'll get to in a minute, but I will start with asana, but just so you know where we're going is, what is spirituality? But let's start with asana, okay? And maybe, is asana spiritual? Can it be spiritual? So why do you do asana? Yeah, sorry, thank you, Ari.
To prepare the body for meditation.
Ah, such a safe answer. Such a safe answer. Very studious of you.
Yeah.
Okay, so she said to prepare the body for meditation. Yeah, I mean, according to this book, yes, right? Actually, no, that's not true. So this is a book, I brought this today. This is the Hatha Yoga Pradipika by Swami Muktabharananda. And this is one version of this you can buy, okay? You can buy, does anybody have the other version? There's one that's this big. Yeah. That one, I can tell you, it will feel very satisfying because you'll read it fast, but you won't get much out of it because there's no commentary.
No, it doesn't make.
Yeah, it won't make any sense. This has great commentary. You do have to be on guard though, because this book is from a specific lineage. So when I say lineage, anytime you hear the word lineage in yoga, that should be a flag for you to recognize dogma is soon to follow. Okay? Culty could be. And in this case, it was. Yeah, in this case, it was real bad culty vibes. So I hate giving them money, but this is definitely the best version of this one. And I think their like harmful cult stuff has been broken up.
I think.
No, it has. It has. They got busted. It's a good book. They have great literature. Like that's the thing is like potent stuff can be appropriated, even if it's not necessarily culturally appropriated. It can be appropriated for egregious things, right? Yeah. Yes.
I do it because it was the first time I felt safe in my body.
I love that. So, did you hear that, Tisa? Okay, cool. I'm being good about making sure Tisa's. I'm double downing. I'm taking care of you today. Okay. Why else do people do asana?
Connecting my body, because my body is my instrument.
Yeah.
And connecting my body and my breath so that I can feel that it's not overextended or underextended, that it's kind of in a place of preciousness. I don't know.
Oh, I love that. Well said. Seriously.
Oh.
Yeah. That is really well said. Yeah.
To get out of my mind and into my body.
Hallelujah. Yeah.
I'm similar to connect my mind and my body and be more aware of my body outside of my mind.
Yeah. Great.
I would say to create space like physically in the body,
Mm.
but then in creating that space, you're also creating a space for the mind as well.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. Does that make sense to everybody else?
Good, 'cause I don't know how
Yeah.
to say it.
If anybody says no, you're in trouble.
Go.
Yeah, Reva.
Cultivating focus.
Cultivating focus. Yeah. Cool. Peg?
I do it because it works, but what it does for me is it calms my nervous system and it calms my mind. And when I can find that stillness, right,
Mm-hmm.
then I feel like I connect to something greater that gives me peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where I go.
Tisa, were you gonna pop in?
Yeah.
Sure.
Kind of to comment on what everyone else has said, but to shift energy, whether that be to fire it up or to slow it down, but to have a tangible shift of energy.
Love it. And that, I will say, just to add on, that is what this book is all about. So the sutras, that's Raja Yoga. What you're reading about is under the assumption you've already shifted the energy. You're already in a sattvic state. And Patanjali is basically saying, now here's what you do with sattva. This guy came along, 1500s, and they were like, oh, people aren't getting very sattvic. So let's give them a real clear roadmap of how to get sattvic. So they work real hand in hand. Like hatha yoga, this is about shifting energy. The next step is what you do with that shifted energy. I saw some more hands. Anna, why do you do asana?
Prove to myself that even though my body's broken, like I can do something. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that's like not a great answer, but it's just the truth.
I think it's a great answer. I want to softly challenge your phrasing, because if you're going to, and I don't know what your intentions are in terms of being a yoga teacher, but I would definitely challenge the belief system that a human body can be broken. But if you're not going to be a yoga teacher, carry it to your grave if you want to.
I want to be a yoga.
Good. Yeah, I would say then take the time to reframe that for yourself. And I'm not going to give you what I think about it, but yeah, but I think thinking of yourself as broken is very limiting in a way that won't do your students any good. Yeah. But I think that really recognizing your limitations as a human being is so much more supportive for your students. Recognizing the ways in which maybe what you're thinking of as broken might be under the realm of limitations, right? That's going to be kind of your gold for your students. That's the irony of it. Yeah, Amber?
Well, and just to tag team onto that, a nugget that I really hold on to when I'm really like struggling and trying with my body is that the thought that your cells regenerate. So your whole entire body becomes new every 7 or 10 years or something. And that to me just gives me so much. It's like your bones are reborn, your brain is reborn, and you're shedding all your skin like you're trying to shower. Anyways, my knee-jerk reaction is why I do yoga is for the gram. But to go deeper, it's like for the.
I follow you. That's not why you do it.
No, it's not. But to the thought to raise everybody's consciousness a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
Do it for everybody, not at the times where you can't do it for yourself.
Okay.
For other people.
So now we're getting into the territory of, and with all these answers, I mean, everything we've heard so far, would anybody argue that this is not a spiritual endeavor? So think of your own answer. Would you, if I were to say, that sounds also spiritual. That sounds like it has some spiritual seeds in it. Like you're not just doing asana for that reason, but it's also giving you some spiritual health and wealth.
So we can show up differently in the world for those people.
Well, there doesn't even need to be a so. It's just,
Make Instagram woke. Do it.
well, I think with what, yeah, I mean, so let's get to the second question. What is spirituality? So I said a definition earlier. I said spirituality at the very baseline, like this first step forward is just figuring out how to live. Like how, once I'm safe, once I'm not in survival mode, what is my first step forward and why? Where am I going? You know what I mean? Like that's the spiritual question. Really boils down to, why am I here? Where do I come from? Who am I? What am I doing? And where am I going? Right? The big fundamental questions. But what is spirituality? Is it like lighting incense? Huh?
You looked right at me and I was like, I'm formulating.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I would say like a devotion to forward movement in a positive sort of direction, but the devotion to the next.
So what you just described to me, in my brain, I boil it down, the common denominator, I'm looking at my math teacher here. The common denominator for that is satkara, going back to that. Like to me, that's great. Like that's what I want to get to with the basis of this question, is what spirituality is to you. For what is your satkara, right?
Satkara mean again?
I don't know. To do something true, to move in the direction of the truth.
Well, isn't it the idea that we're here, I feel like all humans are born with this innate desire to search for something that's more, something more, right?
Mm.
And I think that spirituality is like doing that, searching for the higher truth, the higher self.
Oh, this is good.
You know, like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like it's-
yep. So let's talk about that higher self and like this. Let's go to the E word. We're going to talk about enlightenment. I don't like it.
I thought you were
one
gonna
bit.
say ego, that's the opposite.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Maybe enlightenment is all about ego, actually. So, what, going back to this question, what is spiritual? Like when you think of somebody who's spiritually realized, like, is that attainable to you? Do you understand it? What are the pieces of it that are abstract for you? What are the pieces of it that you get? You know what I mean? Like, let's start with this. What is a mystical experience?
Something that you can't explain.
Exactly. The word's right there, mystery, right? It's something that happens that's mysterious to you. But mystical experience kind of also bakes in that there is, so we all know what PTSD means, right? What does PTSD mean? Post-traumatic stress disorder. Have you ever heard of post-peak experience order? Huh? Yeah? I just made it up. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's not my idea. Post-peak experience order is the exact opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you have a traumatic experience that is traumatic enough, it causes a disorder because it essentially distorts your reality in a way where your nervous system, the way you perceive things, are just forever changed or for a long time changed, right? It's hard for you to get back to the place you were before that event. Is that close enough? Can we all agree with it? That's somewhere in the ballpark of the definition of PTSD. Well, this is just the opposite. You have a peak experience. After the peak experience, post-peak, the experience brings you back to, and maybe this is actually better. I am going to change this because in science, any of my scientists go here, we go from order to disorder to reorder. So I'm going to put the R there for reorder, right? Things are reordered. So that to me is like a mystical experience is something that is simple enough that it changes you fundamentally, and it may lead you with a little bit of homework to do around how do I integrate this? How do I understand what happened to me? How do I put the pieces of this together in a way that allow the change to be lasting? So let's compare a couple different types of these PPERs. I'm just going to call them PERs. Okay. So one might be taking psychedelics, right? And I don't want to get too in the waters with this because I understand it can be really great for people, and I believe it should be available for people for medical use, especially under high supervision, with professionals. Not the way I was doing it when I was like 16, 17, where I was just like, a wild man driving down the streets of Coral Springs on acid. Okay, that wasn't therapeutic. Let's just put that straight away. But if you take a psychedelic, you have a shift of consciousness. When the drug wears off, the thinking in yoga is that the more authentically earned that shift of consciousness is, the longer it stays with you. So I remember a lot of times I would take like LSD or mushrooms, or now you're really getting a picture of who I was, right? I was wild, man. And that would happen. I'd like have this amazing night and be like, oh my God. And I'd be like high from it for like a week or two afterwards. And then I'd be like, I should do it again. You know what I mean? And that's where I do have a problem with it as a therapeutic, if it's not correcting the problem in a way where it no longer needs to be a crutch, right? And the problem I have with it is whatever, ignore that. But with yoga, the idea is that we create experiences through meditation The peaks may not be as great, but the letdowns aren't as great either, number one. Number two is there's less cost to them, meaning there's no karma around sitting with a meditation, right? The karma is actually, we're stacking what's called state changes, mini state changes, okay? And the end is the same, the means is just different. So like if somebody has PTSD, they go to somebody to take ketamine, and they're like, I just want to be able to feel like my old self again. Well, they have a huge perspective shift, and it can kind of solidify that for a while if they are adept at being coached through integrating it. And, you know, there's some luck involved to it all as well, right? With any medicine. And belief, by the way, let's not forget the number one prescribed drug in the 20th century. You can look this up. What was it? Huh?
Sugar pill.
Placebo. Yeah. Placebo is the number one prescribed drug. Why? Not because doctors are lazy, but because it works. The human pathos, we manifest things. When we believe in things, we have power, right? We shape our destinies. That's kind of the purpose of yoga, by the way, when we're talking about maps and directions and getting from point A to point B. But when I'm doing meditation, I'm leaving these little imprints along the path of my journey here. And they're state changes for 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time, but they're consistent over a long period of time. So I'm starting to stack them, and I'm stacking them with a really, a real sakkara, right? So I've known many people. I have a good friend who actually leads ayahuasca retreats around the world, and they do all the things, you know, the sassafras smoke and all that. So they do with the whole bit, you know, the frog poison and stuff, poke it in their skin. And it's funny because he goes every year and it's the same guys. And like, it's always stuff that he comes back this year and he's like, oh my God. I go, what? What was your realization? He goes, I need to quit drinking. I was like, your 50-year-old man needed to go to Costa Rica and take ayahuasca to realize you need to quit drinking. You know, it's like, it's funny to me, but like it worked at the same time. So I can't criticize it, but also I do believe if you meditate long enough, if you, you know, because that's how I came to it, right? I came to relieving myself some suffering in my life through these mini state changes, and you stack up enough of those, let's just say you get, you know, your credit card of state changes full, eventually you get a trait change, and it happens naturally, and it happens through the unconscious and subconscious mind. Okay. Post-peak experience reorder. This is modern talk for a mystical experience, right? You have some kind of experience. By the way, can a concert be a mystical experience?
Yes.
Of course. Yeah. Music itself. We're musicians, so yeah. But music is absolutely mystical. You know, going on a river, like kayaking, rafting, that can be a mystical experience. It's all about perceiving. Like if God walked into the room right now, are you in a position in your life where you would recognize God? You know, that's the thing. That's what we're trying to position ourselves beyond this state for. Because when we get comfortable, we stop looking. We stop looking for the divine. We stop longing. It's the longing that guides us on. I want to make another graph. I'm going to draw another graph. What's up?
So what I just wanted to say was you said you go up to the comfort place and then it gets hard, but I kind of disagree because I feel like the path through the work makes life way easier.
Because it makes it better.
It's the easier way. It's work, but the way you see the world changes, the way you see suffering changes, because you know that without suffering, there's no growth. At least for me.
Okay.
I believe that the hard work makes life a million times easier.
You're saying easier, but I think you mean better.
Well, better, sure, but the work is hard, but everything.
So it's not easier. It's better though.
Okay, not easier, but okay, better, greater.
That's the whole paradox is when you are using spiritual bypass, you're denying the hard work because you want it to be easier, but actually you are making it harder on yourself, right? Because you're piling up more work you're going to have to do. You're just creating more of a deficit for yourself. Yeah.
I just wanted to say this experience I had because I feel like I relate to it a little bit.
Was it about frog poison?
No, not about frog poison. I don't know if you remember a couple weeks ago, Austin, I went to your class and I left and I was like, that was like my best practice I've ever had. Like I felt like that was like, I don't know how it can get better. That was like my comfort. And I went home and I wasn't gonna go to another class the next day. And I remember Austin saying, yeah, that means your next practice isn't gonna be as great as this one. And I went home and I sat on that and I was like, I'm gonna be sore in the morning. I don't wanna do it. And I signed up for a class in the morning. My next class, it was fine, but it definitely wasn't as good. But I think that even my
And I
practice,
taught that next class,
yeah.
and it was a better class.
And even though that was only a couple weeks ago, like my practices since then, like they haven't been as good as that. But
Yeah.
I think that continuing to practice, like eventually that's gonna happen again. But I don't know.
Okay. No, you do bring it. You're both kind of dancing around this concept that we do have to recognize and appreciate that spiritual progress is not always like face down in the shit. Like there is grace along the way. Like I follow a teacher, a tantra teacher, and that's kind of his big selling point on Facebook is like spiritual work is disruptive. Be ready to get uncomfortable, and it's like I get it because like for a lot of people, like sometimes the big deep end spiritual work feels like you're just ripping somebody's clothes off and like I'm naked in the world and being exposed to everything. But there's another truth to that too, which is you begin spiritual work and it can be very quenching. It can be very meaningful. It can be very satisfying. And it's beautiful. Yeah. So all that to say, I want us to break up into small groups of like, say, let's see. Yeah, let's do, so you first four, you four, and then you four, and I'm gonna just put Tisa with you all. Is that okay? However it works, yeah. And we're gonna talk for about 5 minutes, and I want you to each come up with what is gonna be your intention or goal with sadhana, without us getting into like yet quite learning what the sadhana is for and what it does. So just completely naive and maybe a little bit ignorant, but trusting your intuition, trusting your innocence around this, that like what you're attracted to, there's some righteousness to that. Okay? So just a couple minutes.
So not like what it's gonna look like.
Not yet. No, we will talk about that. Yeah. What? Yeah. What is gonna put your butt on the mat more days than not? That you would like to.
Hey, Ashlyn's here too. It's not just me.
Oh,
Hi.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ashlyn. I didn't realize.
Oh yeah.
It's okay.
Sorry, Ashlyn.
It's okay. Hi.
Hey.
Oh, she was here earlier.
I know. I noticed you weren't here. I was like, where did she go?
Oh, I came back. Let me see if I could get. Well, come here.
It's your dog.
There's a dog.
There's always a dog. Oh, I miss my dog.
When she gets stressed, she moves furniture. So I came back so I could
Remodels the place.
re-put everything everywhere it goes.
All right. So, what is the intention or goal with sadhana? Do either of you want to go first? Cool. I'll go.
I don't care. It's fine either way.
No, it's fine. I think my intention is just to actually like establish one and like stick to something. I don't know what it is yet or like how much of it. I just want to be able to commit and stay with even just a couple of minutes, but it's like an intentional couple of minutes that is towards the sadhana. That isn't just like, okay, cat, cow, let's go. You know, like I want to stretch. So yeah, that's my.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. I'm just getting into like a consistent routine, whether that's like asana or meditation, just having love.
Yeah, I also feel like the commitment aspect has always been the most difficult thing for me because I get too enthusiastic and I get to the point where I'm thinking of like this elaborate scheme of things, and it's kind of like setting myself up to fail. I feel like that's a pretty common thread in our culture, just that we set ourselves goals that we can fail immediately. And so I want to set stuff that it doesn't have to be every day, or like I'm not going to just give myself unrealistic expectations, but turning that into a commitment in a different way somehow.
For me, for me, I think that I kind of view everything as a practice and everything as a spiritual journey and walk. And I guess I'm looking for more specific direction in what the fuck I'm doing. Like, what is my end goal here? Not that I have to have some grandiose goal to achieve, but also like, am I just mindlessly as everything's just a spiritual practice and I'm not feeling the vibes.
But it's not actually satisfying.
Yeah, that implies that it is actually a spiritual practice, because the spiritual practice is not always super satisfying. So it's like this weird catch-22 for me, and I think it all comes back to just looking for a little bit more direction on.
Yeah, figuring out what the fuck is.
So upping your game a little bit to kind of see what will happen.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that the answer? Do I need to up my game? I'm not saying I'm enlightened. I'm saying I am pretty advanced in my thought process and I don't understand what's next. I feel uninspired to just keep doing this. Does that mean I saw my shit and moved? I don't know. Does that mean I don't know. I literally don't. Those are all thoughts that I'm just like, people just do this forever. They just like, dude, I did all the things. And then you just continue to work forever. Like, no, I don't want to do that.
So maybe it's discovering what's underneath it that really taps into it. The taproot.
I don't know.
We're understanding the I don't want to do that, the content. It's not even.
Okay, got it. Got a minute left.
Did we get to?
Yeah, we'll talk. I have an idea. I gotta go.
I feel like I can speak the same that you guys have said. The consistency, I think, is going to be the hardest part. Also, meditation feels uncomfortable, but more comfortable. Asana feels okay. What I think I'm going to struggle with is the chanting. I just have a really hard time with the buy-in of that piece of kind of the sadhana and the spirituality. And I've got my own very questionable relationship with spirituality, and I am my biggest skeptic and I critique a lot. So I'm going to struggle with the spirituality piece for sure.
Interesting. And Ashlyn?
I think I have a really hard time sticking to a structure, especially a routine, because the minute I do not do that exact routine, I crumble and I never do it again. So I just want to find something that has structure, but enough flexibility that I don't feel like one wrong thing is the end of the world.
You ready?
Very good.
Bring it back to circle.
Thanks, man.
I'm gonna have Ryan describe, and in one word-ish answers, we're going to write down answers to this question. What are some signs of spiritual growth?
Reactivity.
What is it?
Non-reactivity.
Non-reactivity.
Unconditional love.
Unconditional love? Who said that? What is that? So, because here,
I'm not there yet.
yeah, well, I'm not sure anybody but Jesus ever was. If you think about people think, well, I love my child unconditionally. Do you? Well, you don't, because the condition is that it's your child. You love it limitlessly. That's a different thing. We confuse the idea of something being limitless with unconditional, but the condition is that it's your child. So maybe something we can shoot for is loving more abundantly. I want to make these spiritual goals things that we can actually reach for. Because like I said, unconditional love, I think Jesus got there. You might be the only one that I know of. There's probably a few yogis. Yeah.
How about not taking things personally? Like not always thinking everything's about you.
Okay.
Listening without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Curiosity.
Curiosity. That's ooh, I love that one because there's two types of curiosity, isn't there? There's like the type of curiosity that is kind of like,
Dangerous.
well, I was gonna say there's the sponsored curiosity where it's like, oh, this helps me and helps other people, right? But then there's the curiosity, yes, that is leads us down rabbit holes of rumination and can be harmful or dangerous. And then you have to sakar on your own and figure out, like, is this helping me or not? Because sometimes hurting is helpful, right? Like, that's the weird thing, is like, it's not always logical the way spirituality works. But if a cult leader is telling you to do something dangerous, there is a power dynamic that needs to be get away. Yeah. Okay. So I'll never tell you to do anything harmful. But if you're like, I need to do this, I'll be like, Godspeed. What else? Yeah. This is such an undervalued thing. Peace is so many virtues that we want to achieve in life. Like, if you think about like goals in America, like the American dream, what is the American dream? To have agency, right? How do we achieve agency? Well, we have enough wealth and power, and sometimes influence and status, right? But we all want that to have agency. Why do we want agency? So that nobody can tell us what to do. Why do we want people not to tell us what to do? Because it takes away our peace. Yeah, it's interesting because we get caught in these little traps that aren't about the thing they're about. It's truths within truths that we need to really uncover. Sakara, once again. What else? Okay. How about, I've got a list. I'm going to list these. How about, have you ever heard of gratitude? You're definitely, sign of spiritual growth is you are a more grateful person. Yeah.
Compassion.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, my man. Okay. Compassion, definitely. Yeah. Oh, sorry. We're raising hands here now.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay.
Discipline.
Yesterday was your birthday, not today, Beth.
Oh,
No.
come
Okay.
on.
Discipline.
My
Yeah, actually, we could do the whole weekend. Yeah. Talk more about why discipline is a sign of spiritual growth.
It's not always about motivation or wanting to do it. It's doing it because it's the right thing.
Oh, so Sakara. Okay. Well, hang on. I love it. And yes.
I can tell you what the definition. I was raised on discipline,
Oh,
but that's the Marine Corps way.
Yeah.
I don't think it's
it's different. But there's crossover, and it can teach you. It can be, some of that can be a platform for you to build off with your spiritual growth. And some of it you can actually use spiritual growth to let go of. I mean, that's the beauty of, if we really are practicing non-attachment, it also means letting go of these samskaras that don't help us,
right,
that are harmful. So yoga is a sorientological thing. What does that mean? That's a 10-cent word, right? Does anybody know what a sorientological process is? Sorientological means that it is purposed to lead to freedom or liberation. So Buddhism is sorientological, yoga is sorientological, Christianity is not. Christianity is leading to salvation, right? God needs to save me. And yoga is not necessarily that you're saving yourself, but you are coming to a place where you are no longer suffering. And because you're no longer suffering, you are liberated. You're liberated from suffering. So it's interesting because Barbara Stoller Miller was a great yogi from the West who translated a version of the Yoga Sutras. And she actually very poetically entitled it The Yoga of Discipline. And I love that because I do think that discipline ultimately leads to freedom. But I don't think it's the freedom that, like, I could just do whatever I want with no cost or anything. It's freedom with capital R responsibility attached to it. Yeah. What about a sense of awe and beauty in the world? Do you think spiritual growth cleanses your eyes to see that more? My little brother, some of you know that I've been working with a boy for, I don't know, he's 20 now, and he was like 12 when we first met, right? First generation Haitian boy with autism and ADD, and he wouldn't mind me sharing that, but it's important for context because I remember one day we're driving home and I'm his mentor, I'm trying to teach him about things in life. And I go, oh my God, Tony, look at that sunset. And he goes, I don't really like sunsets. And I'm like, get out of the car. No, I know, no, he wasn't even a teenager. But it's so funny because as he's grown, now he's just like, oh my gosh, that's a beautiful sunset. But I remember being younger and being in that place where people would be like, look at this beautiful field of grass. Because field of grass. What's this dude on? Yeah, and as you get a little bit more aware of the temporariness of our life. It keys you in on that the beauty is actually, that's what I was talking about. If God walked in here, would you notice? Right? And I don't mean God, sorry if that word can be ugly for some people who've had some religious scars. I mean God is in like Gus, God, universe, spirit, Gus kind of thing, the divine. Do you recognize the divine in things? Do you see it? Is it apparent to you? What does it take for you for it to be when I go snowboarding, the first thing I do is I get out of the car and go, I smell the clean air. Why do I do that when I leave the yoga studio? You know what I mean? Same kind of air. All right, some other small shifts along the path of spiritual growth. Yes, less reactive, better sleep. Do you think that could be part of it? Authenticity. Yeah, those two kind of go hand in hand. The more authentic we are in our life, the better we probably sleep. What keeps us up at night is oftentimes not living our truth.
I said awareness, but then the one that keeps coming up in my head, and I don't know if I'm getting this backwards because it's been a long day, but a healthy contentment with where you are in life, just where you are is okay. It could get better, it could get worse, but you're just, because I know contentment is a strange.
Last week I chewed on this the whole week. Was anybody in my class last week? We talked about Santosha, right? Santosha is tricky because you definitely don't want to consign yourself to just being stagnant and being everything's fine, I'm content, right? Contentment is an active relationship with the things in your life you can't control. Now, the things you can control, contentment is not what you can be content with the work that you're doing with those things. But ultimately, if you prescribe contentment to the things you're trying to change, the work you're trying to do in your life, that's not really applicable there. Yeah. So it's good. It's tricky. And a lot of what we're talking about here is the subtlety. Yoga is an art of subtlety. It's a nuanced thing, right? If we get oversimplified with these definitions, with these understandings, if we're just looking for novelty, if we're just looking for, rational answers or logical answers, we're kind of undercutting the deeper meaning and the substantiveness of this richness that is in yoga. I want to say clarity of intention. So getting really clear about your sankalpa. So you're all going to be asked to create a sankalpa for your sadhana. And I think that what you just started with your partner could be a very good beginning point, right? So, yeah. So those are what I call this. There's a document that's going to be in your Google Classroom called the Signposts of Spiritual Growth in Sadhana. And it's the wows, woes, and wins. So I call them the dubs, W's, right? The wows, woes, and wins. And there's big dubs and small dubs. These are all small dubs. There's some bigger ones in there. Compassionate, I think, is a big one. Making yourself kinder, more loving, compassionate. Being more authentic, that's a bigger one. More resilient to crisis. Less reliant on external stimulus. That's a big one nowadays. more empathetic and aware of interdependent systems, recognizing and appreciating the subtlety and nuance of things, interdependent systems. There's a list too that is not one that I came up with, but one from a book called Transcend. It says greater sense of unity, less sense of existentialism, a newfound clarity. Though the situation may not have changed, the perspective has, like putting on glasses in the morning. These are big W signs of spiritual growth. 3 out of 5, emotional and sensual intensity. Yeah, so the more sensitive we become, right? The more things maybe bother us now that used to not bother us. This is a good thing. This means your capacity to contain and hold those things is growing. Number 4, a sense of surrender and acceptance in your life. So this is the detachment piece, right? This is Sutra 114. And then lastly, resolute desire for or actual change on a deep fundamental level. So wanting to change and or changing on a deep fundamental level. Like those, again, those little state changes. Like when I meditate, I go from sad to happy. Cool, I stack up enough state changes. You stack up 100 of those, I don't know how many. But you do it for a long period of time, consistently, with satkara, with some truth, and it will change a trait within you. You will eventually shift who you are. And that's kind of the whole thing I was making with the post-peak experience. And this will be the last thing I say, we'll take a break. You know, you have a peak experience. Here's your threshold of reality right here. And let's not judge where you're at. Let's just say that this is where you're at. You're moving through the timeline of life, okay? This is your birth, this is your death. All of a sudden you have a peak experience. If it's a quality peak experience and you integrate it well, your new baseline, the threshold will raise when that peak experience ends. Does that make sense? So the more, you know, when you have quality peak experiences that you take time to appreciate, to really frame gratitude around, to really reflect on, to integrate the lessons of and ask questions curiously about what they meant for you, you're going to raise the baseline of your overall quality of experience in life. The goal of yoga, then, this whole idea of enlightenment maybe is so that your baseline, you have a peak experience, your baseline raises, you have another peak experience, your baseline raises. So eventually, over a long period of time, that baseline threshold of just your normal everyday living is a peak experience. Because the clarity is there, the intelligence is there, the luminosity is there, and these are all words for sattva. You're just staying longer in sattva. It's kind of like when you dye a piece of cloth, right? If I have red dye, anybody tie-dyed before? You know how you dip it in, the red, and it's super red, but you come out and it's just pink, right? And then it's a little pinker, and it's a little pinker. This is how sattva works. You dip your mind in sattva, in the luminous clarity of sattva. And it's, you know, as soon as you leave, you're not in sattva anymore, but it changes it little by little by little by little. And you do it enough, and the longer you do it, the more frequently you do it, and the more you stay there, the more it begins to change you on a deep fundamental level. Okay, let's go relieve our biomechanics. The bladders. When we come back, we're going to talk about the operating systems of the sadhana. We're going to talk about Kriya. We're going to talk about Pranayama. We're going to talk about Bandhas. Okay? You doing okay? Good. Enjoying this?
What time are we coming back?
30. 8-minute break. Does that sound good? Okay.
Can I steal your ear for 1 second, Austin?
Please, yeah.
I just appreciate the way that this training is going. My 200 hour, you might know the person who did it and what happened with him, Jafar Alexander. Do you know? Beloved Yoga in Reston. This was in 2020. We were the cohort where, you know, he had some allegations come out about him, and Yoga Alliance put out a huge statement. And so I left my 200 hour with some complicated feelings and some mistrust. And so I just wanted to say I appreciate how this is going, and I'm feeling really good about it. And I just want to put that out there.
Oh God, what a thing that, you know, what a thing. Wow, I can't believe you expressed that. Yeah.
I didn't know if you knew him, but I just wanted to.
I kind of remember something about that.
Yeah.
I honestly, I try not to pay too much attention to those things. Kind of make my stomach sick because my deepest fear is that I will inadvertently become a cult leader someday. So I work really hard to like make sure that I am leading with I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
I appreciate that because it creates trust, and I left that training just a little nervous and scared about, but I just need to say like thank you and
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, we'll watch those like cult documentaries, and I will just be sick. Like it will literally make me sick in the stomach. And Laura's all, "This is so good, juicy," and I'm all, "Yeah, I got diarrhea now."
You got really juicy.
You got juicy.
Oh, does it feel better to like walk it around? Yeah. My mom.
Yeah.
Just like hot in different places. It's weird. Are you serious? I am on fire. No, I am. Is that hot? Feel quick, just touch the nape of my neck. I am like on fire. Are you hot? You're also warm in your heart. Thank you for that.
We had a service goddess.
His and her ACL repair surgeries. Buy one, get one?
But it was easier for them because they did the same day. So they could do all of our pre-ops and post-ops together. And then we go to all of our appointments together, so it's just like we're in and out.
Oh, you both were like probably out of it at the same time.
We had everything like prepared at the house.
It's so good that we create.
How are we doing? Good? How are you?
Okay.
You've been here a long time.
Yes, this floor is hard.
Yeah.
Get a chair, Sam.
Yeah.
Why don't you sit in one of those chairs?
That is like.
Of
Yeah,
course, I
get-
just fall in.
Where, yeah, and you have, what do you have at 4:30?
Adaptive.
What time is that?
It starts at 4.
Oh, so you're just gonna be late.
So I was gonna be late, but
You're
I
okay
didn't
with
know
that?
if I needed to be here the last half an hour.
You mean from 4:30 to 5 or 4 to 4:30?
4:30 to 5.
You don't.
Okay.
And you can even, if you want to just watch the video, if you want to be there for the whole class.
I'd rather be in person.
Yeah.
But I can,
Yeah.
I'll pop out at 4:30.
Yeah, yeah.
Go do
So like,
Yep.
That's my.
Cool. Wake up. Yeah, I should get up and move. Oh, the back of my knees are just sweating. That's where I sweat. I'm just all. You don't like success.
I work for a company.
And they're all.
Yeah, yeah, so it's gonna be like therapy there. And so that you yeah, yeah, like actually help, like for health, but it's like when you do that without putting them in like these. Right, like, right. Yeah, and it's just a different style, where like the style right now really helps. It's like, this is what we're gonna work on, and you don't work on it, we're gonna be able to. The major feed issue, like, I actually, sounds like, I'm not hungry, right, or you're eating something that's, yeah, or, finding out I'm lactose intolerant,
Sometimes you have to eat all the food and then everyone's like six. And then it's like, you eat all that food. That's not your job.
So like when I
There is a day.
But in general, if boys with this as well, right, girls are either higher grade. And I feel like this is the way we're doing the thing, like this is about we're making them stay. I'm so used to doing that. I just don't
yeah, you have to. Oh, this is much better. I don't care what Amy says, we're bringing snacks.
The next time we're like, yeah,
Yeah. Okay, let's stand up. Let's stand up. Everyone stand up. Stand up. Okay. And I'm not going to carry you with me when we do this movement because I don't want to get you dizzy. But I can put you in a place where you can see what we're going to do. Okay. So, all right. So bend your knees. And then just do this a little bit. Just pump your knees. And then maybe a little bit of this. Maybe a little hopping. Oh boy. And then carefully, let's hop in a circle. Let's go around that way. Ari, you be very careful.
Are you okay? I think it's just go down.
Keep hopping, keep hopping. Now hop on one foot.
No.
Other foot. Switch it up. Spread your arms like wings. Yep. Flap them like a bird. Yeah. Lifting your arms up to the sky. Look up and say, hey-o.
Hey-o.
And then turn around in a circle. As you circle. Oh, whoa, stop. Can I give somebody high fives? That was good. Okay, have a seat. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, so snacks.
Oh, wow.
Snow dance. What is snow dance?
Circle dance and snacks appeared.
I know.
Yeah.
Circle dance and snacks will appear. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the sadhana real quick. What are the should we chant real quick? Let's chant again to just kind of seal the container. So take a deep breath in, swallow your bite, exhale it out. One thing I want to say about chanting real quick is, once again, don't worry about so much the definition. One of the beautiful things that chanting does is that it helps us override our prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that is like always dividing things into like sense, right? So it can help you kind of like when you're really anxious. By the way, chanting is a great practice. Chanting is the oldest human practice. It's the oldest spiritual practice. Every single religion, every single tradition, every single people have an ancient chanting tradition, okay? So I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. This is the best way to do it. This is a way to do it. This is a chant. And it's great because it's got a nice melody. But what I would say is that, you're doing asana with the chant, aren't you? Because you have to sit up. You have to hold the body in a way to turn it into an instrument. You have to manipulate the vocal cords and the esophagus and the mouth. There's pranayama involved because the way that you're holding the breath throughout the course of the melody. Is there meditation involved? Well, there could be. Depends on what are you focusing on while you're chanting, right? If you're really thinking about the purpose of the chant, being invited into your life, receiving the power of something that through vibration allows you to get into vibrational frequency or resonance with that which overcomes obstacles, right? What is that thing? What is that force? So I guess what I want to say is like, I want to kind of demystify it, even though it is a mystical thing. Like chanting is, you could definitely easily get caught up in some dogma around it, but this is meant for you to explore it and experiment with it to see if I really put my heart into this over a period of time, what will be the effect for me, right? Not like, oh, I have to do this because it shows that I'm part of the Cambio club, right? Because that's not what it's about. Yeah. All right. So take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sukandin Pushtivaranam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshiyamamritat Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sukandin Pushtivaranam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshiyamamritat Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivaranam Urvagamiva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshiyamamritat. Notice the vrittis as they kind of come back online. Did they slow down a little bit? Did they become less abundant? That's the other piece of chanting, is it should help with some of that nirodha, suspending the mind. It gives us an object of focus. Yeah.
So I didn't say suspending the mind, but I find myself when I'm doing the chant, this one specifically, like I am just guessing and mumbling.
Well, you need to learn it first. So once you learn it, yeah. That's how it goes at first. At first, you're just kind of like, yeah. That's okay.
So hard for me to like clear the bridges when I'm just like, that sounds silly.
Yeah. But I would say though too that that's kind of one of the beautiful things about being, taking on a chanting practice is that you have to kind of get over your own ego a little bit with it, because there's going to be that learning. You remember what we talked about last night? When you're going from point A to point B, of not knowing to knowing, that road in between, it's frustrating. It's uncomfortable. So that just means you're learning it. So just trust the process. Yeah. Okay. But thank you for sharing your experience, because I think most people are probably closer to that end than like, I've had Narodaha. Yeah. So I have had the Narodaha. Do they sell that at Chick-fil-A? The Narodaha sauce? Okay, so what are the constituent parts of the sadhana? Let's look at I gave you this last night. What are the 5 components? What is snowing? Cool. So asana, I'm going to put them in order. So asana is number 2.
Intro.
Pranayama is number 3. The intro, yes, we'll put the intro. And what is the intro? What does that include? By the way, what's number 4? We didn't do it today. Meditation. Gosh, this pen. So weak. Okay.
Wasn't there a red one?
I just
There's a blue one.
Yeah, there's get that. Okay. What's this thing? All right. Oh, thank you. So what does the intro cover? What was the word you asked about? What does this word mean?
Kriya.
Kriya. So the Kriya will happen. What did we just do? We chanted. That's part of the intro. Remember the very first thing we did this morning? I said, let's find out where we're at. Let's just take a moment. Huh?
Check in.
Check in. We call it tune in. Okay? So tune in. We tune in. There's going to be Kriya. There's going to be chant. There's going to be a gentle warm up before Kriya, by the way. Some physical movement might happen when you're teaching this. But you're not going to get fully into Sun A's. It could be just integration. Does that make sense for people who haven't taken Cambio stuff? And if it doesn't, remember, if you haven't taken Cambio's 200-hour, all those documents are on the Google Classroom. So the sequence with the series, integration, Sun A, Sun B. So you kind of get familiar with like the language we use around it. Not saying it's the only right one. I'm looking at you because you did it somewhere else, but I'm sure there's other people. Yes, you and Tisa. And yes. So tune in, Kriyas, some warm up chant. There's one more piece here that we did.
Assistant.
Huh?
Did you say assistant?
Well, we'll put that as a 5th category here.
Oh, okay.
But that's not necessarily something you're going to do on your own. That's just something you're going to do as a teaching practice, right? You're going to use the opportunity here together to practice the teaching of assisting. But when you're home, you're going to focus on these 4 categories. What's the word? So I gave you, I kind of like, remember, I was like, through understanding and compassion, I co-created Sankalpa. So we're chanting the mantra, but Sankalpa is different. And it could be kind of like thought of as like the mantra I tell myself, like that's kind of a, appropriated way of saying that. But truly, it is a Sankalpa. What does Sankalpa mean? It can be framed like that, but Sankalpa means creative resolve. So oftentimes it's referred to as an intention too. Okay, so boom, 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 boom. Let's go through it now. We tune in. That's the start. Find out where you're at when you do a sadhana. Notice where you're at. Then you can chant or do the Sankalpa, right? And on a given day, by the way, you're like, oh, I don't have 2 hours for my practice. So all of a sudden, I'm not going to do the Sankalpa today. I'm not going to do the chant. I'm not going to do the asana. I'm not going to do the pranayama meditation or any of the intro. I'm not going to do the sadhana today. Okay. But what I would say is, also there's a hidden thing in here that's not really listed. I'm going to say that this is the 5th thing. and I'm just going to put it as DR. That stands for deep relaxation. This is extremely important. Deep relaxation, we know, through neuroscience, that one of the things that's happening when we're doing a sadhana is we're creating neurogenesis. So that neurogenesis, that neuroplasticity sticks better when we have short, brief bursts of intensity, creating the new pathways, and then we rest afterwards. If we don't rest, it won't really stick. Those highways will kind of dissolve back away in the brain. So the deep relaxation is every bit as important in this. So what I would say is, like, on a day, I'll just tell you what my non-negotiables are. My non-negotiables are Sankalpa. I do this every single day without fail. And then Kriya. Kriya is the most powerful, potent, like that's your desert island yoga technique. You're getting asana from it. You're getting pranayama from it. It's a meditation practice. It's creating tapas. It's shifting the mind to sattva. I mean, it does the whole thing that sadhana is designed to do in one technique. And it's the only technique that really, you could say chanting too, but chanting doesn't really give you tapas unless you do it for a long time. That's why, like, you see these people when they get really into it and you're like, wow, they need to get a hobby, but that's why you do it with such intense repetition, because it creates tapas that way.
Okay, wait, what was the Kriya we did today?
We did 2 of them, actually. That's a trick question.
Yeah.
Because we did one for pranayama.
Which was
I look at my hot teacher in the room. Quick aside, real quick. There's 2 offerings that I want you all to know about. Amy's doing a hot training with Janine in April.
It's 2 weekends in April.
Yeah.
Not the 3rd weekend.
So you can do that in tandem with this. It won't interrupt or overlap. Rebecca and Amy are doing a sequencing workshop tomorrow. Some of you are interested. They said that they would grant access to the recording for a discounted price, but you need to sign up or let them know that you want to sign up in advance so they know. So I would do that tonight if you want that. And I'd say that's a great compliment to this program. I cannot recommend. Both of those people have interned for our sequencing here. So a lot of what they're teaching is designed to help kind of funnel you down the path towards where we're headed here. And I can tell you that only in hindsight will you realize that the design of the sequencing for this course, you can't really touch the bottom of for years down the road. It's designed that way. So the more that you kind of preload the work in terms of like challenging yourself with it, the more you're going to get out of it. Does that make sense? Like, you can do the bare minimum of the sequencing homework in this program, you're going to get a lot out of it. The deeper you go, the more you'll get out of it. And this is a way to get a lot deeper without it being extra work for you, if that makes sense, other than taking a workshop. There is also a yin training in May that I'm doing. But back to this action. So there were 2 Kriyas we did. What was the first one called?
Or that's something different.
That was one of the ones we did, but that was during the pranayama. What was that one called? So this, we're jumping all over the place. So just to be clear, the one we did in the beginning of pranayama, that Kriya was called Kapalabhati. Say Kapalabhati. Yes, I want to get you the words in your mouth, and there's never going to be a test on this, so you can be as accurate or sloppy as you want, but I would assume you would want to go to a teacher who knew a little bit about this stuff, right? This one is Nauli Kriya. Starts with the end of the Nauli. So say Nauli. 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 Okay. So what does Nauli Kriya do? What is the purpose of Nauli Kriya? Let's look at all of these things. We're going to look at these things from a physiological perspective, a psychological perspective, and a subtle body or spiritual perspective. I like to say subtle body because spirituality can be, we're not talking about like tarot cards and astrology, which could maybe be included in that. We're talking about subtle body, so that shortens the category of spirituality. We're talking specifically about chakras, doshas, koshas, gunas. Yeah? Okay. So I'm exhaling all the breath out and I'm holding the breath out. What physiological response does that stress how does the body adapt to that stress response? Does anybody know? It's okay if you don't know.
Does it
I
do
didn't
something
know.
in the vagus nerve? I feel like that always comes up.
I know. It should do something with the vagus nerve. Or you could say, is this going to lead to talk about poop? Because that's a lot of times where yoga talk goes.
Does
So
it force the oxygen through your whole body because you're knocking off the routine of your breathing, and so your body kind of goes into a hiding mode where it's like, oh, we're short on oxygen. Get oxygen everywhere.
it does, which then in turn creates CO2 resistance. So it flushes the organs of stale oxygen as well. So it's great because it's the most uncomfortable breath pattern is holding the breath out, but it's probably one of the biggest bangs for your buck because it's going to create CO2 resistance. It's going to create a richer uptake of oxygen, fresh oxygen into tissues and organs. And yeah, I mean, so the bandhas that we're going to talk about in a minute, we'll come back to the vagal nerve stuff, right? And how that works with all this stuff. So one physiological response to Nelly Kriya is that it increases CO2 response, which if you start to look into like breath work stuff and benefits of breath work, that's a real big deal. Like it's kind of the cutting edge right now of like, like 15, 20 years ago when sports science got really into meditation because everybody was like doing the same training. And, there wasn't that much big of a difference between this elite athlete and this elite athlete. And they were kind of doing the same things, and eating the same foods and the same amount of recovery. And then the next step was, okay, now we're going to talk about visualization. We're going to talk about, manifestation, all these things. And meditation was, for somebody like Michael Phelps. I mean, Michael Phelps is amazing, but like you hear him talk about what put him ahead of people. It wasn't his training. It was about his mindset, right? Well, now the new one, by the way, now that everybody's doing meditation, everybody's doing mindset and elite athlete, world is breath work. And that's the first thing you're going to come up with is like building your CO2 tolerance is going to be the most efficient way for physical response. So Nelly Kriya increases CO2 response. If you look into this book, which is on your recommended reading list, Pranayama by Gregor Mahl, he's like a yoga hero of mine. He's a German yoga teacher who lives in Perth, Australia, with his Australian wife, who's was a chiropractor. And they've been teaching and studying yoga for, I think he moved to India the first time in 1978, so the year before I was born. That's a long time ago.
Is he really old?
No, he's in his 60s. He just was like, basically right out of high school, he was like, this ain't it. Yeah, he's like, this ain't it. Let's go figure out some other things. So that book, though, you can get into a whole list of everything else Nelly does physiologically. I just think kind of like highlight the important thing is that it tones the abdominal muscles. It creates breakage of some of that scar tissue and some of the viscera and connective tissue in the abdomen. So like, we can do things that like we get muscular tension holding patterns in our body, right? Especially through the soft tissues of the body. When you are forcing the body to go through relaxation and contraction, you're essentially repatterning some of that stuff. So on the very basic level, it's like, you're creating digestive health because it's kind of helping flush the GI. But also, like some of those muscular tension patterns aren't good for our posture. So it can have effects in your meditation. It can have effects in the way that you actually feel like you have a relaxed psoas, so you can take a deep breath in the world, and you're not, it can help you complete the stress cycle. So Nelly Kriya, I think, is a really, really powerful technique physiologically. And yes, it has vagal nerve effect too, but I want to say vagal nerve for bandhas. But what is it doing on the subtle body? And this is the big question. And I heard you kind of talking about tapas, and we've talked about tapas a lot today. And this is an entry point back into this conversation about fire and how we're using the element of fire in our yoga practice to alchemize things, right? To change basically lead into gold, right? To become a dense person into a body of light, right? A spiritual being. So you have this. What are the doshas? Let's just start there. What are the three doshas? Do we know what the doshas are? Who's Who's heard of the doshas? Raise your hand. You've heard of the doshas. Okay. You've not heard of the doshas? You have. Have you not? You too? Who's a dosha expert? No, okay. Okay, so the doshas are, dosha is a word that means humors, but that's kind of misleading. It's like the physical constituents, the categories of physical aspects of like, so you know what Amber was talking about, Sankhya? The doshas come from Sankhya. So you go from Purusha to Prakriti to Chitta to Buddhi, Ahamkara, to the Tanmantras, to the Gyanendrayas, all these different things. Eventually you get to the gunas. We talked about the gunas today, right? So what are the three gunas? Tamas, Rajas, Sattva. Yeah? So those are the subtle or mental aspect of the doshas. When they become more gross, and kind of keep this in mind, everything that's happening in the world, the momentum, the inertia of life is either taking something that's subtle and making it more dense. And that's kind of, that's what we would call entropy. Anybody familiar with that term?
Yeah.
Yeah, what is entropy?
Entropy, I always forget a little bit. It's like.
Entropy, well, I'm going to have to go way back.
Yeah, it's like scientific.
Let me give a short answer. It's going from order to disorder and chaos. It's an evolution. So we think of evolution as a good thing, right? Because we think of it as an adaptation to stress. Well, evolution itself, the word means down and out. And that's what entropy really refers to, like a star, right? A star is collected, the energy combusts in a certain way where it starts to lose some of that energy over time. After a while, that has an effect on it. And it goes through all these different phases and stages of life until it explodes and completes the life cycle into full entropy. The full chaos, full disorder is no longer a star, right? Same thing is going to happen in your body. You know, you have roughly 11 different elements in your body, you know, and then eventually you die. And whether you're cremated or buried in the earth, those will be returned. You know, the hydrogen in your body is not yours. Sorry, you're on loan. Yeah.
Sorry, just I don't know if it's the marker, but I can't make out what you're.
TRS. This is,
that.
yeah, bloody marker. Okay, so this is subtle. This is the gunas. As it gets denser, as it becomes more entropic, it turns into the doshas. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. God blam it.
The question was, what are the doshas?
What are the doshas? So the doshas are like, they're things like kapha, pitta, and vata. Who's heard of those things? Kapha, pitta, vata, right? So vata is what? Oh, it's beautiful. The snow.
That was Vata. Right
That was
there.
vata. Squirrel. Squirrel, right? Like thin hairs, skinny wrists, very light frame, right? Like pitta is like a muscular frame. It's like a it can be, yeah, it could be. But pitta often is like deep set eyes, you know, more of a square jawline, more of a kind of there's a little bit more tissue on the bone than a vata person. And then a kapha is even more supple, right? And it may be less kind of muscular tone, and it might have more, the body composition might have more fat in it or adipose tissue. So these all connect to those things, right? So sattva is connected to, believe it or not, vata. Rajas is connected to pitta. And tamas is connected to kapha. Okay? So remember, like, if we do nothing in our life, we are traveling in the direction of entropy. We're going back. Remember that X cubed graph? We do nothing, the direction down is entropy. When we do spiritual work, we're reversing evolution into a thing called involution. So rather than going down and out, we're going up and in. All right. So the doshas are, the reason they're called the humors, these really are like Larry, Moe, and Curly, the Three Stooges, right? The reason they're called the humors is because they kind of make fools of us, because they lead our life in ways where when we're just suffering the doshas, it's like, oh, this happened and it was so predictable, but I didn't see it coming, right? Like there I am in my pitta behaviors, doing my pitta things and landing in my pitta outcomes. I'm burnt out, I'm fiery, I'm burning bridges, I'm pissed off, you know, That's the Pitta experience, right? Whereas like the Vata experience is very freaking predictable, right? I'm anxious. I can't fucking decide. I can't sleep. I'm cold, by the way, you know. So the doshas have this kind of like natural human like hold on us in ways that Ayurveda, you're all familiar with Ayurveda. So Ayurveda's goal is to balance these, to create a balance of these. Yoga is very different. Yoga is the sister science of Ayurveda. Ayurveda means study of life. Ayurveda. Ayur study, Veda, life. Yoga being the sister science, you can think of as the study of death, right? In a lot of ways, because of that letting go concept. Again, coming back to detachment. We're going to be dead someday. So why don't we practice some death along the way? Well, how do we do that? Why don't we insert Shavasana in every class, right? But we actually really do benefit from the deep relaxation. We do. So we want to let go of these. But in Ayurveda, we're trying to balance them. In yoga, we're trying to transcend them or eject them. Long story short, when we are doing Navali Kriya, we are converting Pitta, not back to Rajas, give me this, to, what's the word? Thank you. Agni, or Agni, if you want to be really specific about the Sanskrit. So what's the difference between Pitta and Agni? So last night, Amber and I were talking about you have three minds, right? You have like your gut brain, you have your heart brain, and you have your brain. So your vagal nerve is a nerve that connects from your anus through every single organ in your body and ends at your ears. The most robust part of the vagal nerve is the connection from your gut to your brain. So there are afferent nerve signals, there are efferent nerve signals. You don't need to remember the words, but what you need to know is that 90% of those nerve signals is the gut talking to the brain. It's not the brain. Think about it. If like I'm craving Doritos, my brain doesn't go, I want Doritos. My gut goes to my brain, Doritos sound good, right? So Pitta, it is housed in the gut brain. So this is where we keep our fire, right? And it lines up, it maps perfectly with the Manipura chakra, right? The third chakra. What's the element of the Manipura chakra? Fire. Yes, okay. So this is like Pitta. Think about Pitta as like a forest fire. It's not contained. The energy is not being used for anything. It's not discriminate. It's going to burn these weeds down, this field of weeds down, the same that it's going to burn this house down. And that's kind of like if you're a Pitta prone person, you go through your life and you're not going to really be able to contain your passion, your power. Now, the Kriya converts it to Agni. Agni is still fire. It doesn't put the fire out, but it's the difference between like going out of the woods and saying, I'm going to start a fire, throwing a match on the ground, versus like getting your Boy Scout book out and like getting the logs and some kindling and some scaffolding in your fire. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like making a real fire, containing it, creating a burn area, a safe area around the burn area. This is kind of like the metaphor of like shifting from Pitta, which is this is uncontrolled fire that's leading you with desire and aversion, right? Because that's the kind of the main brain of the Manipura chakra is like, oh, I want that. And I don't care what gets in my way. I'm going to win to get it, right? I'm going to compete. And if you lose, too bad, so sad, because I got what I wanted. Or we're like, ugh, F that. I don't like that, right? That's another part of Pitta. And it might be we're doing this to some things in our life that actually are really good for us, like vegetables, right? When we're little kids. Yeah. But little kids don't know better. And it's interesting because that's also a gut thing. Yeah. So when we've converted it successfully to Agni, we call this a metabolic fire. So what we mean by metabolic is that it is now converting energy into purposeful use. So say I look at social media and I see a lot of violent imagery, right? That's just getting dumped into my subconscious and unconscious mind. How is that going to affect me? I don't know. Again, it's going to affect me in a way that I'm not really holding the wheel. The idea with converting Pitta to Agni is not only am I going to be less prone to look at things that I know are going to have maybe a harmful or negative effect on me, but if something happens to me that's harmful or negative, I have my hands on the wheel, so to speak, and I can actually, maybe I can't avoid the pain or the suffering or the trauma or whatever it is, but I can have an active role in minimizing it or doing something about it. Okay. So Agni and Pitta, this is the difference, like having a puppy right now, right? The puppy I fight, like gets my shoe. Pitta is me going, God damn it, puppy, bad, you know? And then I kick the puppy into the street. No. I wouldn't do that. I love my puppy. Versus like, I have to be like, dad puppy has to be Agni, right? Because I still have to train him with fire. Because if I'm not, you know, dogs speak in this language. They only speak in terms of two things. I want that, and I want to feel real good, right? So if you don't like, and I don't want to be like every dog gets trophy kind of thing over here, right? Like sometimes you have to negatively reinforce, but positive reinforcement does go a lot further in terms of like redirecting, managing the situation, making sure the dog doesn't have access to the shoes. That is all Agni, because I'm metabolizing things that are coming into me in ways where I know where to put things. I'm putting things, I'm reordering things. So when you may be asking yourself earlier, well, if I have a peak experience, how do I integrate that? Agni helps you in an unconscious way to just make use of the energy of both the good things in your life and the bad things in your life. So it doesn't just get into this complex, like, I don't know what to do about this. And you get behind the 8 ball. You know what I mean? You kind of stay once, like anybody play soccer? So there's a coaching. I was not, well, the reason I brought it up is because we were going to play real quick. No, but like, you know, a coaching statement might be to a soccer team, like, get on your front foot, right? Like if you get caught as an athlete in any sport on your back foot, you know, you're basically just playing defense, and you may not, the best you could possibly achieve is a tie, right? With good defense, but you're still probably going to lose because you're not on the front foot scoring. You have to make, you have to be proactive. And Pitta is very retroactive or reactive. Agni is kind of seeing the situation for what it is. It's literally called intelligence, right? So Agni is the first step to shifting our relationship with the world. Those things earlier we were talking about what we can't control. One of being ignorant and dense to being subtle, artful, intelligent, and responsive to with sensitivity. Does that make sense? So it's an abstract concept, this concept of Agni, because we don't really have a good English proxy for it. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. So what you said was that Nali Kriya, doing all that work, one of the things that it does is it turns the Pitta, the dosha of Pitta.
That's the biggest, this is the biggest thing that it does. This is the most important thing it does. It converts Pitta to Agni.
And what does it do anything for the other people, the Vata and the Kapha?
So we're going to talk about those. They will get ejected through the rest of the sadhana.
Okay, but that's mainly just for the Pitta.
That's mainly just for the Pitta, which tends to be kind of the main provocateur of the doshas.
Okay.
So Vata is pretty benign when it's left to its own, what am I trying to say? Devices. But when you vitiate Vata with Pitta, you get into trouble. Same thing with Kapha. If you vitiate Kapha with Pitta, because Pitta is always in between. It's in between the two, right? So if you're lazy and then, you know, so if you're very Kapha and you're just like, I'm a slug on the couch and don't get up, I've been out see people for a week, and somebody comes and says, hey, maybe you get up and come out and see us. And you go, fuck off. That's the Pitta protecting the Kapha, right? That's not good. But if you're like, that Pitta is converted to Agni and Kapha is still ruling your world, somebody says, hey, maybe you should come out to the park with me. You're like, I don't want to, but I know I should, so let's go. And it's that simple of a difference in life sometimes. We're not even aware that like we operate on these unconscious and subconscious levels in the decision making and the relationship to our desires. That's what we're talking about. These are all relationships to attachments. They just represent characteristics of the way that we relate. And we all have all three of them in it, but which one are you more prone to? Is your relationship to your desires very fiery and passionate? Like, yeah, give me that right now. And I manically paid for my teacher training, right? Like that's a Pitta thing. I did the same thing over Christmas. I bought like $500 worth of guitar pedals. And I was like, I am a bad man, right? Like, I was like, oh my God, my wife. I'm like, Laura, we need to talk. It was bad. I was coping. There's worse ways. And then if you're inactive, if you're just stuck in your way, right? Like you're not challenging yourself. That's the way you're acting with the things that are approaching you. That's the way that you're dealing with entropy. You're just letting it take over. Vata, well, the way you're dealing with entropy is that you're just like trying to do all the things, right? Trying to do all things all at once, by the way, too, and real fast. So the moral of the story is that the doshas are not, you can balance them all day, but they're not going to be the thing that brings you any kind of relief. We have to transcend the doshas. We have to kind of get rid of them or convert them. So converting Pitta to Agni is the moral of the story, why Nawali Kriya is so important, okay? Outside of creating digestive health, and the yogis knew how important digestive health was. The gut-brain connection. They didn't need white papers to know that, like, oh, this makes a big difference if you eat a sattvic diet. You don't eat too much. By the way, sattvic diet, if you want to know what that is, it's mostly real food, mostly plants, and not too much food. That's a sattvic diet, simply put. You follow a sattvic diet, and you do the practices, you're gonna have a sattvic mind. What you're inputting into the body, if it's sattvic, you're gonna get more of a sattvic outcome. Okay. Questions on Nawali Kriya? Did you love it today? Or did you hate it?
That's weird.
It's just weird.
Yeah.
It's just gonna get weirder.
I don't feel it.
Yeah. You liked it? Cool. Yeah. It's super frustrating if you can't get it. And, we've had people go through this training who still can't get it. And by the way, this is not the only way to convert Pitta to Agni. It's just the most direct way. Okay. This is the way, you learn to do it here. So, we're teaching you the techniques to get up to the plateau so then we can start practice the Raja Yoga, right? Because you can't reach Nirodha, Pitta is ruling your life. You know what I mean? If your mind is just all over the damn, like it's kind of funny to think about that. We all assume like, oh, yoga is Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is stilling the mind. Well, do we ever bother to ask the question, have I ever stilled the mind? Have I ever achieved yoga? I mean, the first time I ever did it was probably my 30s. The first time I actually realized, I was like, what the hell just happened? And I had to like look back and be like, oh, my mind stopped tormenting me for a brief moment in time for the first time ever. It's like when you call the IT person, you're like, my computer's not working. They're all, unplug it and then plug it back in. That is Nirodha. It's that moment of just being unplugged from the bloody wall, right? Yeah. It's that sensation. It's not the same thing. You're still plugged in. Okay. So we get into asana. We're still working with fire. Now we're starting to develop tapas. Now, I heard y'all talking about this over here a little bit, right? So tapas has more to do with the relationship on this level, the mental level. Tapas is, well, to be, there's a third category of this, right? So this is doshas, this is gunas. Then there are the subtle elements that correspond to this, which is ojas, tejas, and prana. You've heard the word prana, right? What is prana? Life force. So by the way, when vata is purified, it becomes sattva. When sattva is elevated, it becomes prana. When pitta is, unenforced, rajas is the connection. And from there, you have tejas. God bless, it's not tapas. I'm going down the wrong road. Kappa. What is this? I can't. And then ojas. Okay. All this to say is that tapas is important. That's going to be the main thing that you're going to be like feedbacked on when you're getting feedback from the interns. When you start teaching asana, the main question is, was it safe? Was it well-rounded? Was it accessible? Was it intelligently sequenced? And then, was tapas achieved? So, Sophia, do you mind sharing, because you had a tapas experience today, right? And it was very distinct.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing it?
Today
Yeah.
and Austin just came over to just me, and I was like going through the flow, but I wasn't really like sweating. Like I wasn't like feeling the heat really. And then Austin like adjusted me into like what I would say like in my body, it was like the perfect place for my body to go. And all of a sudden I felt this like heat like go with it like in my body, and I started like sweating. Like I felt it like come out of me. And I was literally like, whoa. And then like that moment I just recognized like, whoa, I just felt like this burst of heat. And I just thought that was like it was like very energetic. It was like spiritual. I was like, whoa. Like it was weird.
Thank you for sharing. Has anybody else ever felt that, like that weird heat that just overtakes all your cells? Yeah? No?
Yeah.
Yes? In a yoga class? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Anybody not ever experienced that? It's okay.
Be specifically what you're describing, or just any sort of unique experience from yoga?
I'm talking about tapas. Like that sense of, because really what it is like, you know, tapas we talk about, what is the definition? It's slippery. It's like heat, fire, and it comes from discipline, but it's a spiritual heat that comes from the inside. It doesn't like make sense. It's not like, oh, I'm hot because the atmosphere is hot. And it's not like necessarily, oh, I'm hot because I'm running really hard, right? Or doing cardio. It's a different kind of like heat that kind of overtakes your body in almost on a cellular level that makes you kind of feel almost like liquidy.
Kind of like a hot flash.
It is. It's very similar to a hot flash in a way. Right? And so we are trying to achieve that. And sometimes you don't achieve that in asana. Sometimes you only achieve that in pranayama with longer holds and things like that. But how do we know, even if we're not like hitting that inflection point, that moment where like, you know, the lead turns to gold or whatever, the alchemization, how do we know we're headed in the right direction? Well, our mind is focused, we're disciplined, and the effort is there. Okay, so that's, if you're doing that, you're already doing tapas, even if you're not having like the kind of the, I would say the energetic byproduct of it. Is that making sense? Okay. So you know it though in a class when you don't get tapas, right? When you're super distracted, you don't really feel like the itch gets scratched, right? It may not be like a peak experience like what Sophia is talking about, but like, you know when you get it, you know when you don't get it from a yoga class. Have you all taken the yoga class where you're just like, I didn't quite get all the way where I needed to get? Yeah. Okay. I'm not believing you are all on the same page with me. And you're going to be judged on this. So I need us to understand what tapas is. So talk to me what you're thinking, what your questions are. Yes, please.
So you went through, okay, from the aspects, certain things that we should like hit. One would be safe, well-rounded. You said another word, and tapas. I'm like, okay, I'm not connecting with that, what you're saying. I have no idea what you're saying.
Okay, well, so everything that you're learning in the 200-hour, if you teach us the sequence we teach you, it's going to be well-rounded, it's going to be intelligently sequenced, it's going to be accessible, and it will be safe as long as you cue it well and give modifications. So all those things at this level, or by the time you all are all teaching classes here, those should be like in the bag, right? So all you have to focus on in your asana after that is making sure that tapas is achieved for students. There needs to be an effort level appropriate to the timing, the cueing, the overall sequence, the series, the challenge of it, to where people are having moments where you're hitting your edge, essentially. That in asana, you're hitting your edge. And that's what tapas is you come to a point where you feel your own limitations in asana in a way that it doesn't, you hit the limitation, but it doesn't limit you. You hit the limitation and you feel a sense of expanse there. Does that make sense? Something else opens up beyond that threshold or border. You with me? Yeah, I see a head nod. Thank you. Not a lot of those going around the room right now, Teresa.
Well, don't let it fool you. I'm still a bit confused, but
Yeah.
I'm not lost. So.
Well, remember, these are esoteric concepts. They're abstract that don't have direct definitions to yoga, or excuse me, to English. Again, English is a limited language. Sanskrit is liminal. Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm getting stuck, is that for me, there's always points in a class where I'm feeling like the strength building side of that heat.
Yeah.
And I guess where it's hard is being like, okay, is that tapas or is that just muscle?
It could be
strength?
both. It can be both. So here's one thing. You will not get tapas in a yin class.
Right.
Tapas, well, I suppose it could be if it's really hard. If you're really stiff and you're really disciplined and you're really focused in the discomfort of it, tapas could, but it's not conducive to a yin class, right? With yin, you're working with elements of like water and earth. In vinyasa, or more like a hatha style class, we're working specifically with air and fire. And between those two, we're kind of like, we're creating the right type of fire to burn at the right temperature in a controlled setting, and then we're feeding air into it. We're feeding specifically ujjayi breath, which, what does ujjayi mean? Victorious. Which I want you to think about, like, ujjayi breath is also sometimes thought of as psychic breath. So what it means is that you can bring attention to any place in the body via the breath, via ujjayi breath. So when yoga teachers like say, breathe into your hips, it sounds kind of quackish, but like with ujjayi breath, we should be able to essentially breathe into the hips, meaning that we use the breath to bring attention to what sensation we're aware of in the hips. Does that make sense? So that's how it's psychic. Yeah. Yeah.
So like today in the practice that you were leading this morning, for me, it was when we were on the second side and it was flamingo your leg up and then go back. That's when it set off for me. I was like, okay, this is difficult. But then after we were twisted, but then in the runner's lunge or the lizard, it's like that was like the release. It was burning up and then
yeah, and tapas shouldn't be like you have to destroy your students' will to live, right? Like that, and that's the art of it, is like taking them to the edge so that their relationship with the edge isn't one of like, so like if I'm lifting weights, right? And I'm, if I have the appropriate amount of weights, 8 gets really hard, 9 gets really hard. I'm getting to my edge around 9, and then 10, failure, right? And that's the thinking, is I push to failure. That's not what tapas is you go to your edge and you, rather than fail, you just reverse entropy. You just expand the field. And that I get for most of us, we're like, what do you mean? But like, this is the subtle art of the practice of yoga, and this is the subtle art of teaching yoga. So some people find it like this is why Ashtanga was so popular for so long. Like people would develop a relationship with tapas through really intricate sequences with really complex postures, like really difficult postures. Other people liked Iyengar yoga because there's a different kind of tapas for a different personality type when you're holding triangle pose for 25 minutes. You know what I mean? Like that's hard as hell. So you have to find your own way to kind of serve it as a yoga teacher. Like how do you relate to it? How do you know about it from your own practice? Remember in 200 hour, we always use this maxim, what is it? You teach for, how does it go? You practice for your students, you teach for yourself. So say it with me. You practice for your students, you teach for yourself. When you practice for your students, what you're doing is essentially learning what works for you. And then when you teach, you're teaching about how to get them there, right? And learning the craft of, specifically comes down to cueing. A great teacher is not one who's like so clever, like my sequence is so badass, you'll never know what's going to hit them. You never know what's coming next, right? Like, no, you can sequence something really basically for the rest of your life and be a phenomenal teacher. It comes down, the real special sauce is in the theming and the cueing. Nathan, you got a question?
So,
or Nathaniel?
Understanding on the top of us. So, I am trying to, tapas is like, you're like trying to push it to like the red line, if that makes sense.
You're pushing in, not necessarily a red line, but you're pushing into a field greater than ... So earlier, remember Peg said something about, we were talking about the definition of spirituality, and she said something about like connecting to a greater power, right? So, okay, for instance, like anybody ever do a long run, like a long distance run, right? So I've done long runs, and there comes a moment where you hit a wall and you're like, shit, I cannot go any further. And all of a sudden, and we call it the second wind, right? And that's just generic, but there's no second wind. You're still breathing the same air, right? That is tapas. That's when tapas kicks in. That's when this fire starts to work for you in a way where it's not burning you down. It's fueling the engine for you. And you move into an expansive space. So if this is very abstract to you all, I want you to start to really look for it in your yoga practice. And I think it was really cool that you experienced it today.
Yeah,
So
I had
big.
no idea what this even was.
Yeah.
Like, I just felt it.
Alexis?
I have two questions. One, if tapas is like a second wind, like if you, because I
Can be. So
Can be.
that's like would be under the umbrella of tapas. Tapas is a bigger concept, and
Okay.
yeah.
Because like when I'm doing yoga and I'm going like, and it's the sequence is hard or I'm pushing my limit, like it's easy to feel warm, but I'm not feeling like I could keep going. I feel like I'm at my edge,
And you need to take a break.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is
And
that tapas or is that just something?
I think that, okay, so, I'm not advocating for like, we want to get tapas, meaning like burn yourself out, fry yourself out, push past your limits. No, actually knowing your limit and being like, oh, I need to take a child's pose, that's discipline. That is tapas, absolutely.
Okay.
But, the important part is that you got there, right? If you're not putting in the effort and then you take the child's pose, it's not tapas. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
One second. You're
Ryan
next.
did a really great class. I'm just gonna give you some praise here, and there are a bunch of us, 200 people in it, and we were holding poses for a pretty long time. He was adjusting, but it wasn't like I'm gonna die, but it was nice, long, good adjustments and everything. And at the end, and after Shavasana, he said you could stay as long as you want. We all were like, is that tapas? That we pushed ourselves to the point where it was like, this is max. I get it.
Okay. So earlier I said when you achieve tapas, there is a byproduct that happens. Does anybody remember this? There's been so many things said today.
Heat.
No, not necessarily. Heat is kind of the tapas, right? But we're kind of getting everything up to temperature. Once we get up to temperature, shit that doesn't matter anymore. When shit doesn't matter, it doesn't matter anymore. We're left with essentialities. The essence of things is sattva. So this is the second component of this is like we build up to tapas, and the tapas is kind of the controlled fire that burns out all the other BS. Remember, what fire does is it purifies, right? So if I put a mixed metal in fire, the more impure metals will burn out first, right? The more pure metals will become more fortified. Think about that from your own perspective. Like the longer as a yogi you stay in the heat, you're kind of purifying yourself in a way where shit that you let bother you that doesn't really matter, it's not going to hang on in those spaces. And you're really challenging yourself, right? Like if you're running a 15-mile race, you're no longer going to be like, what did that person mean by that text, right? All you're thinking about is what is essential, which is the next step, and my lungs are on fire, right? And it doesn't, I'm not saying it has to be that intense to get the benefit of tapas. In fact, the less intense it can be, and you're still getting the effect, the more you're becoming a yogi, the more you're becoming an artist of a yogi. Hang on, because Tisa had something she wanted to share first.
I don't know that it's anything that relevant, but it is. But these are just my two thoughts swirling around about it. One is how thoughtful and complicated, how much thought has to go into sequencing to be able to offer or provide tapas for every person that comes to your class and takes a seat that day. But then I keep thinking, you asked the question of, have you ever been to a class where you haven't felt that tapas? But I guess the idea ultimately, aside, human things aside, that when we're so deep in our practice and a connection to ourselves, that no matter what class we take, we should be able to bring ourselves to that tapas place no matter what's offered.
And that's a big point of this conversation,
Yeah.
is that now you are all practicing in ways where you now are setting the goal for yourself. During the asana, as a teacher, you're trying to service that for the students. And as a practitioner, you're trying to achieve that for yourself, because that will make the rest of the sadhana connect the other parts together. Tapas is just really intrinsic to everything else working the way it needs to work.
Okay.
Yeah. 1 second, Ashlyn. Alexis?
Actually, it bounces off Tisa's point or question very well. So do you have any advice on how we can reach people at different levels? Because I feel like people are gonna be able to, it might take somebody longer to feel tapas than another person.
So there's an old saying that says, I like teaching intermediate students because beginner students know nothing, advanced students don't know they know nothing, and intermediate students know they know nothing, right? So always just strive to be an intermediate teacher and an intermediate student. But your question actually leads into the whole track of the next 9 months for sequencing is exactly that. Because we're going to sequence a beginner class, we're going to sequence an intermediate class, we're going to sequence an advanced class. And you're going to use a pose that's going to be the heart of all three of these sequences. And that same pose might not show up, but the same energetics, the same physical effects will be the focus of each sequence. And within each class, you're striving to achieve tapas so that you can eventually land in sattva. Yeah. So do I have advice on how? Yeah, it's going to take about 9 months to get it out. Hang on. Ashlyn, first.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry. So just to be super clear, I'm trying to think of like tapas and separate it from that idea of like physical exhaustion or like physical burn. And my question is, so I hike a lot. Miss Willow, there you go. Sorry, she's screaming at me. I hike a lot, and usually about halfway up to the summit, I think I can make it to the summit, but I'm gonna have to be helicoptered out of here because I am not making it any further than that. It's not that I'm physically exhausted or that Miss Willow, be quiet, please. Sorry, she's barking at me. It's not that like in that moment I'm physically exhausted or in that moment I'm like at my end, but I can feel it coming. And then when I get in my car, I'm like, oh, okay, that wasn't it. Would that be tapas or would that be something else?
Well, I think, yes and no. I think we can overthink it. Remember, it's abstract, and what you're talking about isn't yogic in the first place. I mean, it can be. We can, it's easy to say, oh, everything I do is yoga, right? Like when I mountain bike, it's yoga. And it's like, well, at a certain point, if everything is yoga, nothing's yoga, right? So we eventually have to kind of like say, what then can be, what are we doing in a yoga class, right? And yeah, I don't have an answer. Ari.
So when I think about tapas, I don't know if this helps, but I feel like the easiest way to achieve tapas in any type of class is just to focus on the Ujjayi breath.
Yeah.
And start with the fire
Thank
in
you.
the belly.
It is less about physical. It has, eventually we want tapas to be more of a subtle experience. So it's great kind of master is the breath. It's not about like how long am I holding it, but sometimes holding it deeply will make you breathe deeper. It will get the breath moving in a way where it invokes the tapas, and that's the point. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna share, I taught a class like not too long ago. I think Sherry, when she comes back. But anyways, where after class somebody had said, you know, like, oh, I felt this heat, like it was tapas, and so I was kind of talking about it in like my very and they felt it in like the peak pose. So I was like, sick, did my job. But then somebody else was like, yeah, but then I was like hitting it, and then we did like child's pose after that, and they're like, and that's when I felt it. So I was just gonna kind of like draw the line between like it's not a straight line.
It's
You're
not.
not building up to something. It could hit anybody at any time. It could be in the first child's pose of class. It could be, you know, in happy baby towards the end. It really, there's not like a.
It could be years of practicing yoga and taking teacher trainings, and then finding out, you know, your mom is dying, which is what happened to me. You know, that was like a tapas inflection moment where I was like, oh shit, like the way I'm approaching my life, I've got to get real grown up real quick. You know, it took a lot of discipline to like be the person that I needed to be for that transition. You know, I mean, tapas, it's not exclusive to yoga, but we're specifically trying to cultivate it and invoke it in yoga in a way where we're working with it in ways that are less haphazard and circumstantial and more intentional. Yeah. Nerding out on tapas. And we're not any closer to any answer, are we? But here's maybe the challenge for you is, tomorrow morning, what I would say is just have it in the back of your mind. Think about where and when is this idea of what maybe I think it is in my relationship with it. Where is this happening in the practice, right? I mean, ultimately, it is about the heat that comes along with, well, I mean, what is discipline? If we think about what discipline is like, discipline is like, I want to get out of Utkatasana. My legs are burning. That's not discipline. The discipline is staying in the Utkatasana, right? So in that instance, it is very specific, like A squared plus B squared equals C squared. But it's not always that way. And so as a teacher, it's slippery. I will tell you this. Your students will know it when it happens to them, even if they don't have a name for it. Because this is what happens. They go, oh, I feel so much better after class. Because they get to sattva. The main point is tapas is the road to sattva.
I was just gonna share that. I always say, when I took a class from Caleb the other day, it didn't feel like a power class, but I literally walked out and was like, that's the best class I've ever had in my life. You're my favorite teacher now. You know what I mean? Like that.
First off, how dare you?
I told him not to tell him. That feel, and that's happened to me before. I went to Rebecca's class one day. Oh my God. It's something that happens, but for me, it's kind of like you know it happened because of the wind. Like you don't know how it happened.
Yes.
But you know it happened.
The wind blows the right way.
When you get off the mat and there's a shift.
Well, you know, if you think about if you're starting a fire in the woods, right? Like you have a piece of flints, you have some tinder, kindling, and you go after it. Has anybody ever tried to start a fire? It is very hard. And like, by the way, you can get it going a little bit. You're like, yes. And then you blow it out. And you're like, shit. You know, so this is similar with yoga. It's like, the thing is that you're trying to create this combustion, and it's not going to happen at your will every time. Constituent external circumstances have to conspire for these inflection points. And it's going to happen for you by creating the conditions for it to occur. But if you don't create the conditions for it to occur, it never will. But just because you're creating the conditions doesn't mean it's going to happen every time.
That's the energetic one.
Yes.
You're creating the condition, but their body is in control of the energetic one.
Absolutely. Yes. As a teacher, yeah.
And they're agreeing or fighting it, or.
And it's not even on a conscious level for them. Yeah, it's their
never
karma. It's their so much like. There was nothing I did to Sophia where it was like, and tapas, right? It wasn't like, it wasn't anything she did either. She's like, ah! yeah, like light the fire. It just happens. Yeah, it cleared.
It was like when I first got into like the position, I was just like, it just felt like my regular flow, and the feeling you get from tapas, like kind of coming off of what you said about how you can't tell if it's like just burning from like your muscles or if it's tapas, like you feel it. Like it's not like I just felt it like in my legs, like I felt it like everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, you feel that heat like all over.
Yeah. So when we come back from break, we'll talk about other things than tapas. Okay, let's come back at 45. All right. Nathaniel, I'm not sure we ended up getting to the bottom of your question. Sorry about that earlier. Or you can say it right now. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No.
What? Where are you gonna be?
Sister's reunion. It's kind of a sister just turned 60.
Why you gotta?
I definitely.
What day are you gonna miss? How much?
Saturday, Sunday, the weekend. That's when my sisters could go away. I can do that.
Is it recorded?
Yeah, we did.
But one of them might be recorded because I think we have someone that needs to do some one weekend today, which I think is good.
And like, I was like, in this in your group.
What's on the second weekend? Is that
Whoa, and everything just kind of went like.
that's the floor seat? Oh, I see.
Yeah, so it's like.
Yeah. Or I could just go to a lot of them.
Just go through a lot of classes.
I could talk to you.
Well, here's the other thing we can do is we could maybe figure out a way to.
I really.
Yeah, right?
I love it so much. Anybody else notice this whole runaway? Yes, I did. Like it was just like it ran with nothing and then it ran back the other way. I couldn't tell what it was, but it just made me so happy.
Austin, got it, right?
Hit me.
So.
So
Nothing is really down to much of this compass thing, because this is a new concept.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, because I think I felt it today, but I'm not sure.
Mhm.
We were doing one-legged.
It was like a.
And it's a whole day.
Yeah. Yeah. Half moon. Uh-huh.
So what if,
I usually fall out of that like crazy. And for some reason, I was just.
I don't know.
Get everything squared away, breathe, and it was there.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like a hot,
but you
feeling,
also
it was more like a, like,
all right, figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about these things,
Mm.
but it's not even.
But I didn't feel like hot, I just felt like it.
It felt
And
like
it
I
was
didn't even like,
kind of
well,
like
I
there was
Oh, you
hear
kind of like
lifting
vibes.
to it, where
No.
I didn't have to work.
Ooh. Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
tapas or is
That
that
can't-
something
so let me
else?
know.
No, I think that is definitely connected to what we're talking about.
Okay.
I'm not gonna, I mean, I can't say, like, I would be lying to you if I could tell anybody that they had a tapas experience, right? Like, all I know is that I know it when I feel it, and, you know, your idea of it might be this big right now, and over more practice, you get closer and closer into being like, oh, here it is now, and I know exactly what it is. So you just have to play with thinking about it in your practice in a way. Oh, I want to say one last thing about it that maybe will bring some clarity to it when we come back. So everybody can hear. Yeah. I said I wasn't gonna talk about tapas anymore. I said no more.
It's hard to explain it, but you know when you do it, right? Okay, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Tell me, I just always think I was gonna ask you this. Okay, so in Kundalini Yoga, we always focused on our third eye during our class. What do you think about that? Like, I know everything is big, so.
We're gonna talk about it right when we come back.
Okay, because I do it a lot, because I always feel like it helps me.
That's great.
It feels good, like that
There's a
whole.
lot of neuroscience behind how
Okay, there is.
Focusing
Because you know
there
how you always
creates
say,
more increased interoception, awareness in the body.
okay, because you know, when I go through, that's bullshit, that's not true. You know, they told me a lot of stuff
I know.
on, you know,
But a lot of it works.
it does work, and that's why we're gonna say, like, I started.
The
thinking,
source of it's bullshit.
Right, oh, I
But
know
the
that.
but the technique and benefits, a lot of it is like
I
it
mean, it
fucking works.
kept me alive, like when I was in my basement every
And
morning.
that's why I say,
doing
like,
this.
people are like,
Do it.
yoga elitism is such, I don't know, it gets me, because people are like, well, Kundalini is bullshit, you shouldn't be doing it. It's like, but if it works, do it.
That's
Who
what,
cares
that's what
about
I
where
was
it comes
talking
from?
to Ash, what's her name? Erica about it. She's like, it works for me. And that is the thing, it does work. I haven't done it, like, I did it like recently a little bit, but it's I feel like my body's just not there the way I used to do it.
No, yeah. It's super intense.
Yeah, when I was in my 40s,
Yeah.
I could do it.
I get frustrated with Kundalini because they'll just reappropriate certain things. I'm like, that's not
Right.
the right word.
Right, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but other than that, practices, you just have to be careful. If you feel like they're blowing your nervous system out,
No, in fact, because I was so in that worst
it
space.
was good.
Like, you know, we would do this meditation like this for 36 minutes and then take a break and go do another one. You know, this 36 minutes and we're chanting and all that, but that's when I had the most aha moment of connecting to God. I just, then you try to explain, it's like, no, it's a feeling. Like, it's a feeling that you just can't, and then keep searching for it.
Mhm.
But you know what
Hey,
I'm
do
saying?
you have Inside the Yoga Sutras with you? The purple one? Do you have the book today?
No, I didn't bring, oh yeah, that one, yeah. That was.
Let me borrow it real quick. Oh, thanks. Choking on a hazelnut.
Oh, don't do that.
So you're leaving early?
15 minutes. And the roads are icy, so.
You're leaving when?
Well, I was gonna leave 15 minutes early, and I was stuck. My sister.
So you're leaving 4:45?
Yeah, but by the roads, she said,
Are they?
Well, leave whenever you need to be safe. Yep.
But what
You
am
all
I
right?
gonna miss? What's happening? What am I gonna miss? Yeah.
We're gonna go over homework
Oh,
at the
you're on
very
there.
end.
I can find it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
I'll figure out how to
But
find
it's
it.
also, yeah. Yeah, watch it. I'll post it.
Show me how to look at that.
Man,
When you're kind of close. Yeah.
I need water. We're back, but nobody's here. I guess they needed a longer break.
I can't find it.
They're all, I'm not coming back. My tapas are telling me, no.
This homework isn't for tomorrow, right?
No,
It's for the next one. Yeah.
So I'm waiting to see if Erica will let me teach the class a few more times. But I was thinking about the hot training, so we have my
Since he said he doesn't want to talk about it, I can just do it.
But one of the things. She's thinking she might be able to afford it.
You're really
Another- Yeah, I know, she knows that. But, yeah, so I'll figure it out. So I was like, yeah. Sal's on this class, and I said, I can go.
Okay, we got lots of cover. Let's circle up. Last word on tapas. I've got one last thing I want to say about tapas, okay? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So if you look it up in a book, a yoga book, all right? So when I went to India, there were yogis who were doing tapasyas. This was like, and tapas oftentimes means just austerity. Do you know what austerity is? It's a hardship. So as Carrera puts it, he says, accepting pain as help for purification. You're going to get to that sutra. Accepting pain as help for purification. That's a very, I would say, grasping definition of tapas. accepting pain as helpful purification. Oh, sorry. I'll buy a new copy if it's wrong. But you know, these yogis, their teachers would say, okay, your tapasya, your austerity will be to hold your arm up. So we saw Yogi had his arm up, and that was his practice, was to hold his arm up. So his arm had died, and it was just up because he had it there for 12 years. And another yogi couldn't sit down. So he had to sleep with a little swing, and his legs were like that. Yeah, so we can don't get, people get too wild with tapas. Like their prehistoric yoga was called tapasya. Like that was the word for yoga before yoga. And a lot of times people would do things that were extreme, like they would go to the Himalayas and they would go out with a loincloth and do nothing but pranayama, and that would be their tapas. They just do, in freezing temperatures, just do these insane breath holds. In this book, we look at it and it says 3 different definitions. A specific type of pain and hardship. It's one of the niyamas, an austerity, that eliminates the mental impurities by suffering and endurance. And then the other one is just austerity. Okay? So it's a discipline, right? You're saying yes to the hardship. And this is kind of like going back to that X cubed earlier, right? When we're in spiritual bypass, we're like, oh, life isn't, life would be too hard if I did the work. But by not doing the work, life gets harder. So you accept proactively the hardship of life. That's going to give you a specific outcome. When you choose a hardship that is one within the umbrella of tapas, the outcome should be of sattvic quality. That's the whole point to this. Yeah, it should bring you clarity. It should bring you illumination. It should bring you intelligence. Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
I swear, if you say something about tapas.
But I'm just confused how does so I thought tapas was more rajasic. So how does it relate to sattva? That's the part of it.
So, all right. So like when I get my puppy out in the morning, he's like wild as shit. And I take him out and I run him with the ball. I run him with the ball, run him with the ball. And then he is just serene.
Okay.
So it's like running the puppy. Think about tapas brings you to sattva the same way you run a puppy's energy out, right? But like, here's the thing. Yoga is so brilliant that like there are different practices that are primary for the different ashramas or the different stages of your life. So asana is the primary practice for the first 25 years of your life. 25 to 50, you should be focusing more heavily on pranayama. 50 to 75, it should be meditation. And then 75 to 100 is called the sannyasa period, the sannyasa ashrama. And that's all about renunciation and it's about surrender and letting go and detaching. Okay, can we put a pin in tapas?
Yeah.
Move on. All right, I want to talk about bandhas. So, all right, so we do the kriya. We do the asana. We create tapas. The tapas should create a certain level of sattva. If we are not sattvic mentally, we should not do pranayama. This is very important to understand. If you are not sattvic, if you are rajasic or tamasic, pranayama is not only difficult, but can be oftentimes counterproductive. So that's why, like, when you see Facebook, people are like, oh, come take our breathwork stuff. Like, this is not in line with yoga. Yoga is like, pranayama is very powerful. It should be done. I don't know if you've ever seen this like in a book. Like, pranayama should be taught to you by a teacher, like a dedicated teacher, in person, right? Because pranayama is where you can do a lot of damage to your nervous system, especially with powerful pranayamas. So you need to be in the right state of mind first. You've had to run the puppy and then achieve sattva. Then we begin pranayama. The 3 pranayamas, what was the first one? What's really a kriya? But what do we call it? Kapalabhati, or skull cleansing breath. What does it do? It pumps cerebral spinal fluid. It activates the 3rd chakra. So remember now the kriya depletes oxygen, increases CO2 resistance. Kapalabhati does the exact opposite. Kapalabhati, because it's a 4-to-1 ratio, we exhale sharply, and for however fast that exhale was, that's how we want the breath to be 4 times as long in. But it's passive. But ultimately what that does is it over-oxygenates the blood. All right? So that really brightens up the mind. It really clarifies the mind. Like if you want to have like when those meditations where you like go into really like space where you're like, oh, I don't even know I was for 10 minutes. That's because the oxygen is decreasing because you're probably getting shallower in your breath and CO2 is increasing. You do a lot of Kapalabhati, it will bring you very present. It's also a great way to get out of a bad mood. If you're in a really bad mood and you want to just like pick and choose of your sadhana for that day, I would say chant and do Kapalabhati. And if you're still in a bad mood, well, you're just pickled. All right. So Kapalabhati also, it's in the name, kapha. It clarifies the remaining kapha. By the way, ujjayi, as I call it earlier, as the psychic breath, yes, it allows you to bring attention throughout the body, but its real function during asana is to eject kapha. So somebody asked earlier, we get the pitta out with Navali Kriya or convert it to Agni. How do we get the kapha out? We do Kapalabhati. Bhati meaning purifying kapha, right? However, that can increase pitta a little bit. Depending on the type of year, depending on your personal dosha constituents. So you might get a little bit more pitta. That's why we do the cooling breath next. Okay. So the Kapalabhati clears the mind, excavates the rest of the kapha, but it might fire up a little bit more of that pitta. So we just cool that off with the cooling breath. Now we're ready for Nadi Shuddhi. Nadi Shuddhi balances the two channels of prana, the two main polarities, which is the lunar and solar, or feminine and masculine. The other thing you need to understand that Nadi Shuddhi does is that it balances the two hemispheres of the brain. So it stimulates the corpus callosum and creates an equal balance between the two hemispheres of the brain. In yoga, we call this the spara. So right now, test which nostril is more open. If it's your left, that means the Ida, or the lunar spara, is more open. That means you're more receptive. That means you're more of an introspective state. You're more reflective. It's great for learning. It's great for being passive. If your right nostril is more open, that means your Pingala nadi, the solar nadi, that spara is open. That means I need to be active. I need to be, so maybe you need to stand up right now to exercise some of that. If both nostrils are even, that means you are, and yeah, it does, but it does mean your Sushumna is open. It doesn't mean that the prana is actually risen, but you are in the Sushumna channel. So if you're teaching a yoga class, you want to be in Pingala. You don't want to be balanced. You don't want to be in Ida. If you're practicing, or where you're at right now, the best place for you to be would be in your Ida, because you're going to receive it on an intellectual level. In your practice, especially when you get to meditation, you want to be in Sushumna. You want both nostrils to be equal. So that's the main function of Nadi Shuddhi. Now, Nadi Shodhana, when we start adding kumbhakas, let's say these words, Nadi Shuddhi, Nadi Shodhana. The difference is kumbhakas, kumbhaka. What is a kumbhaka? The breath hold, okay? So alternate nostril breath, just in and out, in and out, in and out, that's Nadi Shuddhi. We're achieving purification of the nadis and balance of the two main polarities in the nadis. And effectively, we get the brain ready for meditation. When we start adding kumbhakas, it becomes Nadi Shodhana, and we're talking about breaking through the granthis. This is a completely different thing. And we won't even get to this in this 300 hour. Okay, so just know that. That's, if you read this book, you're going to read about it. You'll be like, I want to do that. I want to break the granthis. Well, you can. Just keep up your yoga practice for a long period of time, right? So Kapalabhati, say it, is eviscerating the remainder of the kapha, illuminating the mind, because we don't want a tamasic mind. We don't want a torpid mind moving into meditation. We want a really balanced, enlivened mind, but one that we can hold the energy of. It's not all over the place, right? So hopefully the tapas is run the puppy, and we might be tired from that. So the Kapalabhati kind of brings the energy back up, illuminates the mind, clarifies the sattva a little bit more by getting the kapha out of there. Then we cool it off by making sure that the temperature is right, getting any residual pitta from that exercise out. Now we start balancing the poles. We start taking the two, like of a battery, right? You have a negative and a positive. We balance the two, and then the mind is ready. When the brain, by the way, is in balance, what we call hemisphere synchronization, you can shorten this to hemisync. This is when we're primed for meditation. And I'm going to leave that there because we're going to talk about meditation tomorrow, but specifically yoga meditation. So this is not a passive meditation. This is not vipassana. It's not a Buddhist meditation where you're just sitting there, you're going, how am I feeling? Of open observation or open monitoring. With yoga meditation, we're going to be doing pratyahara, dharana, dhyana. So we're focusing the senses, we're focusing the conscious mind, we're focusing the unconscious mind, or we're focusing the subconscious mind, all towards one object, specifically the chakras, okay? We'll do that tomorrow. So now, any questions about pranayama? I know that was fast. There's going to be questions later, but anything right now. So remember, when you're teaching it, I want you to focus on knowing the order. So you're going to always teach Kapalabhati first. You're always going to teach cooling breaths next, then Nadi Shuddhi. You're going to do about 3 rounds of Kapalabhati, 15, 30, 45, with a hold at the end. About 3 rounds of the cooling breath. Offer the accessible one, say Sitkari. That's the Tostado tongue. The taco tongue is Shitali. And then Nadi Shuddhi. You end with that. And by the way, if you read any like real traditional shastra, that's what yogic texts are called. Shastra means revealed knowledge or scripture from, like, you know, a sage, an enlightened sage. They write this from a place of like a sattvic mind. And they say, oh yeah. And so we kind of triangulate that the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the Garanda Samhita, the Shiva Samhita, they say some different things, but the things they say the same, we triangulate and say, okay, so these people, the Nats in northern India, they agreed with the, you know, the Tantrikas in southern India that agreed with the, you know what I'm saying? Well, what we can say is Nadi Shuddhi is unequivocally the pranayama in yoga. If you really want to talk about yogic breath work, alternate nostril breath is the tip of the mountain, okay? But bandhas, we have to talk about bandhas. So we talked about Kriya. Are we clear about what a Kriya is? There's a really great, so I talked about being a purifying action. So a normal action creates more action, right? So it's kind of like this funny thing, like if you take metal and you strike it against an ionized piece of metal, it becomes more magnetized. So if you're sharpening a blade with an ionized metal, it's going to become more and more magnetic. And that's kind of like karma, right? Every time I take an action, I'm striking the blade across the metal, it's creating more action, right? It's creating more result from that. Every cause, there's more effect to it. With Kriya, they call this a self-nullifying action or purifying action. So imagine this. I have a splinter. I take another piece of wood like a splinter to get the splinter out. This is a Kriya. An action that ends an action. An action that ends an effect to an action. All right? All right. So Kriya, pranayama. What does pranayama mean? I don't know either. Breath work, why not? No, restraint of the breath. Yama. So remember we have our yamas, right? In the 8 limbs. Yamas, niyamas. Sorry if you're feeling dumb right now, but your brain's tired. I get it. It's okay. You don't know this stuff like, you know, day one. You're going to know this like at the back of your hand by the end of this. So don't feel, if you feel frustrated, don't let that make you feel stupid right now. So pranayama, restraining the life force. That's all it means. Controlling the life force. And in a lot of yogic texts, they say that's what a yogi is. If you really want to understand what a yogi is, yogi is not somebody who do handstand. A yogi is not somebody who has a sankalpa. A yogi is not some, remember we were talking, if everything's yoga, nothing's yoga. Well, what is yoga? Because mountain biking can't be yoga, right? But then where do we draw the line? Because there are tapas involved with mountain biking. Well, a yogi is one who controls his breath. Because if you control your breath, you control your mind. If you control your breath, you control your life force. If you control your life force, you control your body, right? So it's all kind of hinged upon this connective tissue of prana. If you can control prana, you are a yogi. And that's what we're trying to do. So I can't overemphasize how important pranayama is to this whole kind of journey that you're about to head on for the next 9 months. Like, double down on your pranayama, because it's a shame that in modern Western yoga, contemporary yoga, we don't emphasize pranayama enough. Because when we're sloppy with our breath, we're sloppy with our thoughts. And it's hard because, you know, Trauma-informed yoga, the last thing you want to do is go in there and tell somebody how to breathe, right? Because a lot of those people, they need to have agency. But once you heal enough from whatever agency you're lacking, you have to, it's always returning to discipline. That's the trick of freedom. It's two sides of the same coin. The other side of freedom is discipline. The more freedom you get, the more discipline will require to hold that responsibility. So finally, bandhas. We're going to be working with 6 bandhas. We showed you, I'm going to use bandha and mudra interchangeably, okay? So bandhas are like locks, mudras are seals, but whatever. They're ways in which we control energy, okay? So this was what? What was this called? Jnana mudra. And it's a hand mudra. So this is a hasta mudra. Okay, so say hasta mudra. Hasta mudra, right? So the 3 you probably know really well. Jnana mudra, probably dhyana mudra. Dhyana means meditation. Jnana means wisdom. There's significance to, there's symbolism, like the index finger represents the ego, right? These are other elements or aspects of chitta, the mind. But this is the ahamkara, the ego. So we bow it down to Brahma. We bow it down to God. So we don't let our own ego disturb us during pranayama meditation, right? So there's beautiful, poetic mythology to some of this stuff. You can take it or leave it, whatever, it's there. But it is kind of like code for an operating system. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like when you write code into HTML code, like it changes the way certain things function. And you can think of the way in which you just hold your hands as ways that affect the nervous system in very subtle ways that you may not even be conscious of. All right. So Hasta mudra, Dhyana mudra, you know this one's called what? Anjali mudra. By the way, Anjali means palm. The book that you're reading called the Yoga Sutras was written by who? Patanjali. Pat means fall, to fall into the palm. And there's a whole cool story about that, which I'm going to save. But yeah, so that's, I like that though. When you think of Anjali mudra, you know, it's like connected to Patanjali. So those are the Asta mudras. What other mudras do we know? Or bandhas? Let's just go with bandhas. Let's go to bandhas now, because there's a billion hasta mudras, right? Like there's books about it now. By the way, you're not going to find them in these ancient texts. You're only going to really find those 3. And you're going to read a lot more about mudras in these that have nothing to do with the hands. Just know that. If you ever get into like the deep dive of like traditional yoga, you're going to be like, wait, I thought all mudras were just had to deal with hands. No. And I thought there were a lot more hand mudras. That's kind of like, we just kind of took it in the West and we're like, how about this? And we'll call it, you know, Kali mudra and Ganesha mudra, right? So great. Again, placebo was the #1 prescribed drug of the 20th century. So does it work? Heck yeah. But is it got traditional roots? In most cases, probably not. Sorry to like, I know it sucks to have the magic dispelled sometimes when you're like, I didn't want to know how the sausage was made. I just wanted eggs Benedict. All right, so what are some bandhas? Mula bandha. Where's the mula bandha at? Base the spine? Yes. Okay. And what is that muscle called? Pelvic floor, to be exact. Where's it located? Perineum. I want somebody to get dirty with it. So it's in between the anus and the genitals, okay? Yeah, so it's that space in between there. That muscle specifically, it's a diaphragmatic muscle. It's called the pubiococcygeus, or the PC muscle, and it lifts, all right? And so the idea with bandhas is that you are closing a seal where prana can leak out of. So when you engage Mula Bandha, you know, in this book you might read and remember, I doubt you will, maybe not even read it. You're supposed to read it. But if you read it, you probably won't remember it. There's 9 gates that prana leaks out of. It's your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your ears, your genitals, and your anus. And I think that covers it. So again, if you're a yogi, you're controlling the prana. How do we control that prana leak? Mula Bandha. Okay. So where can you practice Mula Bandha in the sadhana? Does Mula Bandha happen with Nauli Kriya? Yeah. Yes, it does. So engage that. If you're not engaging it, engage that. Does Mula Bandha happen in asana? Yes. But it's always fluctuating. This is where it's like a jellyfish, right? Mula Bandha, the diaphragm, I'm gonna do hand movements. Here's your perineum. But think about the way that it moves with the breath patterns. As you initiate the inhale, you should engage. And you can play with it different ways. Whereas you exhale, you can let it relax. You can hold it through the exhale. Not really any wrong way to do it, as long as you don't clench it, and then it causes tension in the actual sphincter and anatomical parts of the genital. You don't want to affect other parts. You want to get surgical with Mula Bandha in a way that you really are keeping the sphincter and the genitals completely unaffected by the lift of the pubic coccygeus, and that takes time. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. Okay, so there's the Mula Bandha. By the way, Mula Bandha directs energy upward. It directs prana upward. Okay. Anything else you guys want to say about Mula Bandha? Good. Let's move on. It's the primordial bandha, right? It's like this primordial energy. So if you're struggling a lot with addictions, sexual desire, survival instinct, Mula Bandha is a great place to start to work with therapeutically, by the way. Okay. What's the bandha right here? Oh yeah, Uddiyana Bandha. Good. So Uddiyana Bandha is complex because we don't really ever do it fully in asana. And in fact, right now, for asana, the only place we're doing it is during Nauli Kriya. So just know that. Like Uddiyana Bandha is the full evacuation, the abdominal cavity, and then the contraction of the diaphragmatic wall, as well as the pelvic floor contraction. So it pulls the lower abdomen and the upper abdomen into contraction. And it can only do that if all the muscles are relaxed. So it's a weird thing because you're contracting certain muscles that are involuntarily, usually wired, and releasing the more voluntary muscles like the rectus abdominis, the obliques, etc. What else do we want to know about Uddiyana Bandha? Well, we already know that it converts what to what? Starts with a P, ends with an ita. Pitta converts it to what? Agni. Yes, and this is helpful because Agni fuels our tapas, right? Fuels our ability to have discipline and be in the satkara with our discipline. So we know that it's tapas, and it's not a needless austerity. Yeah, there's intelligence behind it. So that's Uddiyana Bandha. You don't need that in asana. You don't need that in your pranayama yet. Maybe not for a few years anyways. Next one up here. What's this one at the throat called? Jalandhara Bandha. Say Jalandhara Bandha. Oh, hang on. Let's go back. Mula Bandha. Mula means root lock. Uddiyana Bandha. Does anybody know what Uddiyana means? Huh? Yeah. Oh, you got it. It means, yeah, flying up lock. So it also helps turn the prana upward, right? So by the way, if you're ever really, you wake up and you're tired, you're not feeling good, Nauli Kriya is a great way to get your energy back feeling vital and enlivened. And, you could say that it's energy, or you could say it's because you just did a CO2 resistant exercise. Because anytime you flush the organs and tissues of oxygen, it's going to make you feel revitalized. So, is it the chicken or the egg? That's the beautiful thing about where we're at with yoga. Like a lot of science is starting to confirm a lot of the myth of yoga, right? And myth not meaning it's a lie, but meaning it's a story. Jalandhara Bandha means what? Does it have it? No. It means the lock, the net, something like that. Throat. It is throat lock, but it's like a net. It like creates the idea is that, what is it? cloud catching throat lock. So yeah, this diaphragm moves down. So if you think about Mula Bandha, right, it holds, it compresses up, this one compresses down, and the Uddiyana Bandha squeezes. So, you know, all three of them together, this is called Mahabandha. You would use this in advanced versions of pranayama. You don't need to worry about that. The only time we're going to be using Jalandhara Bandha is after Kapalabhati. Here's what I want you to know for when you start teaching Kapalabhati at this stage. If you do 15 reps to do the hold after that, you're going to breathe in, perform Mula Bandha and Jalandhara Bandha. By the way, Jalandhara Bandha can be performed at the top of the inhale or bottom of the exhale. Uddiyana Bandha can only be performed after the exhale, right? Because if I breathe in, I can't push out. I can't squeeze in, right? But I can always do Mula Bandha even during the breath. That's the only one I can. Mula Bandha can be active at all four stages of the breath. Inhale, exhale, hold after inhale, hold after exhale. Uddiyana Bandha can only really be performed after exhale. Jalandhara Bandha can only be performed after exhale or after inhale. Okay? So I do 15 rounds of Kapalabhati. Breathe in, slight squeeze, tuck, squeeze. I'm in Jalandhara Bandha, hold it for 15 seconds. So you hold it for as many seconds, as many rounds as you did it. Lift the head, breathe out. So we're going to try for 15, 30, and 45 tomorrow. Okay? With the hold. The final two bandhas are Jiva Bandha. So Jiva Bandha, Jiva means like spirit, but Jiva Bandha refers to the tongue. So how this is performed, sit up, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna suck your tongue back so it folds in over itself, and then press through the tip of the tongue right at the territory where the hard palate turns into the soft palate. Do you see what I'm saying? So you've got like the hard roof of your mouth, and then there's that point where it gets soft. Unless you're super tongue-tied, and I am, by the way, that means the frenulum is really restricting. And yogis, by the way, used to cut this so they could reach the tongue further back and eventually take it up into the sinus cavity and perform well, and it's called Kachari. So Jiva Bandha is like the beginning stage of Kachari, and there's a whole yoga that's just Kachari. And some people you'll meet, I knew a guy who could do it just naturally. He would just like stick his tongue back behind the uvula up into the sinus cavity. And it was wild. Yeah. We're not doing that. We're just doing Jiva Bandha. So you're going to suction the tongue back, point through the tongue. So the tip of the tongue pushes into the soft palate. This is a point of interest because this is where your pituitary gland is. It's also the base of the brainstem, and it's where the third ventricle of the brain is. So you stimulate a lot of primal brain circuitry, specifically rooted to our desire for food, which is one of the greatest desires we have. Like it's a second chakra desire, right? So Jiva Bandha will perform starting tomorrow during Nadi Shuddhi and then eventually meditation. Okay, so Jiva Bandha is going to happen a lot. It's going to be a big part of your practice. What it does is it suppresses the external focus of the appetite sense. And what it does is it turns it internal. And so you might be thinking, well, why would I want to turn my taste sense internal? Well, there's psychological effects attached to it, right? So like our need to eat, our, so there's a survival instinct there. There's also pleasure, like the hedonistic motivating factor around food, the homeostatic motivating factor around food. And that's connected to our sense of love, belonging, and, by the way, community. So remember when you're, well, I'll save it for tomorrow, but just know that you're binding the sense of taste when you do Jiva Bandha, okay? You're also stimulating ancient brain circuitry, the root, the brainstem, the third ventricle, and the pituitary gland. It's kind of the master gland. Yeah.
when I'm trying to do that, if I can touch that gland without like the suction, but if I try to do the suction, I can't.
Then don't worry about the suction.
Okay.
Suction is just preliminary.
Okay.
And in fact, when you get the tongue there, if you can get it into place, it's ideal to then relax the tongue entirely. And only the very tip of the tongue should be active in terms of pressing it. And the rest of the tongue should be kind of eventually flexible enough to be positioned on itself where it kind of holds itself there of its own volition. Make sense? Anybody getting it?
Did you say binding?
Yep.
It's
Binding
all-
the sense.
All the way back, like there's kind of.
So
three
go as far
surfaces.
back as you can,
Okay.
but don't strain. And both these next two bandhas, do not like go light, because you're going to be holding it for all of Nadi Shuddhi and all of meditation. So that's like 20 minutes of holding the tongue in this position. So you don't want to like go like hardcore, because it can cause a lot of jaw tension and throat tension. And yeah, so soft. Start soft with this one and the next one. So say Jiva Bandha. So we add Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara Bandha, Jiva Bandha, and then the last one is Shambhavi Mudra. Shambhavi Mudra. And Shambhavi Mudra is when you take your eyes and you focus them up in towards the third eye. You probably all have this cued in some kind of meditation or yoga practice that you've done. So Shambhavi is a name for Shiva, but like really the idea is that like you're tapping into your own divine power. So Shambhavi Mudra, you set the gaze, and this is another one, like eventually you want to get the eyeballs pointed up towards the middle of the forehead, but start lower so you don't strain the eyes, because this is another one you're going to hold for all of Nadi Shuddhi and all of the meditation. So you'd be holding it for, and traditionally you kind of like cock the eyes halfway, so you're going to look like a zombie. This is how you're going to look like a meditation for a while. Yeah. So this is not gram. This is not for the gram. Yeah, this is not for the gram. So we've got, what is this? Jnana Mudra. What is this binding? What sense is this binding? The tactile. Yeah, this is binding. So are we all familiar with the term pratyahara? Pratyahara means what? It's not withdrawal, it's turning the senses inward. So we don't want to repress and numb out the senses. We actually want to, instead of them being, their normal function is to like kind of make our way through the world and like navigate as filters all the sensory input to keep us safe through the world. And so the yogis were brilliant. They're like, oh, rather than just like unplug this, let's turn it inward and use this for purposes of meditation. So this first stage of meditation, pratyahara, directs the unconscious mind in alignment with the conscious mind. All right. So because all the senses are connected deeply to the unconscious mind. So first one here, this is tactile. Mula Bandha is connected to a sense. Does anybody guess what sense that's connected to? I know you know. It's the olfactory sense. It's the nose, the sense of smell. So when we engage Mula Bandha, we're actually turning inward the sense of smell. Right, and this is, Mula Bandha connected to the Muladhara chakra, connected to the brainstem, connected to our deepest seated memories. Well, think about like, can you smell grandma's old cookies? Like when you were a little kid, takes you right back there, right? Like that smell takes you to that memory. Sense of smell, very powerful with our long-term memories. So Mula Bandha connected with sense of smell, Uddiyana Bandha, that's not necessarily connected with a sense. Jalandhara Bandha, not so much either. Jiva Bandha is taste, sense of taste turned inward. Shambhavi Mudra is the eyes. So that's 4 of 5, right? So I've got touch. Mula Bandha is the nose. Jiva Bandha is taste, the eyes. So what's the 5th one? Ears. Yeah. So we're going to bind that in the meditation with mantra tomorrow. So I'll teach you that tomorrow. But questions on bandhas? Let's just sit up tall and see if we can experience them real quick, okay? So take your fingers to touch. Now breathe in, 3-part breath. Remember our 3-part breath from this morning? Belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, belly, ribs, chest. Now when you initiate the inhale, I want you to squeeze Mula Bandha. And then let it go on the exhale. Inhale, initiate Mula Bandha. Now, initiate it on the beginning of the inhale, and then initiate it again on the beginning of the exhale. Notice how it can help you breathe from the belly out first. Remember, we're squeezing the toothpaste out from the bottom up on the exhale. The inhale, we're pouring the water into the pitcher, so it fills up from the bottom. So think about the beginning of the breath, both inhale, the beginning of the exhale. That's where we just start over with the Mula Bandha. And just kind of forget about it. Set it and forget it, and focus on the 3 parts, okay? So breathe in, squeeze, and just forget about it as you move through the ribs and chest. Exhale, squeeze, pull the belly in, ribs, chest. Cool. Now, let's take Jiva Bandha with this. Fold your tongue back to the back of your tongue. Okay, I can't do it. Point the tip of your tongue into the soft palate. Find the location there. And let's take Shambhavi Mudra. And so at first, it might be better for you to just close the eyelids rather than keep them open because they'll flutter and it'll just be distracting. Bring the eyes up and in towards the third eye. Tongue folded back. Same thing. Breathe in, start Mula Bandha. 3-part breath up. As you exhale, Mula Bandha, belly, ribs, chest. Subtle breath, but deep and slow. Now your next breath in, we're going to stop at the top and take Jalandhara Bandha, okay? So you're going to breathe in, swallow, stop halfway, squeeze the throat, collect the chest and chin together. 3, 2, 1, lift the head, exhale. Breathe in, Mula Bandha, belly, ribs, chest. Breathe out, Mula Bandha, belly, ribs, chest. One more time with Jalandhara Bandha. Inhale, belly, ribs, chest. Hold, swallow, squeeze, fold chin down. Tongue is still folded. Eyes are up and in. 3, 2, 1. Lift the head. Exhale. Belly, ribs, chest. Open your eyes. Questions, comments? Yeah. So remember when you learned to drive a car, right? And you're like, okay, gotta check this one, gotta check that one, gotta get my blinker, gotta get in gear, gotta look back again, gotta check this. When you first learn to drive a car, all those things you're very keenly aware and conscious of having to do them, right? But now when you drive a car, do you think about checking the rearview mirror? In 3 months' time, if you stay dedicated to this sadhana, Jiva Bandha will be automatic. It will be default. Shambhavi Mudra will be automatic. Mula Bandha, that will still take a little bit of effort. And the 3-part breath will probably take effort for a long time before that becomes automatic in your breath work too. So this is the beginning of the work, right? When last night Amber was like, don't scare him about the sadhana. It's hard. Like we're just starting some of the operational things, right? We're just learning how to fly the plane. But we're still just driving it around on the aircraft carrier. We haven't even really taken it off yet, okay? We're gonna hit the friendly skies tomorrow with it, okay? So other questions, comments, concerns about any of this stuff? So was this hard, by the way? It's a lot going on. And by the way, this is why this is what kind of the tapas trains us for, is to do these subtle things. It's really easy to just be lazy in your meditation and be like, I'm not going to do Mula Bandha, I'm not going to do the 3-part breath, but I'll sit with it. Well, you get out of it what you put into it. It's better to do 2 minutes of really dedicated, focused work with the breath work, the meditation, than to do 10 minutes where you're just passive and not really operating with these things. In terms of like what the purpose of Nadi Shuddhi is, and what we'll go over tomorrow is what the purpose of the meditation is. It's a very specific technique to cultivate and condition a very specific response. Okay, I think that's enough for today. You look like if I keep going, you're going to revolt and never come back. Are you enjoying it? Okay, well, I won't keep going. You can tell me you're enjoying it. But I can't believe it's so much. We're going to go over homework now. Sam's going to take her leave.
See you all in the morning.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And you guys are welcome to go too if you want to pack up, but this should just take a few minutes if you want to hang, whatever you want.
To the people that are leaving, I just wanted to say, I just heard that it was like a sheet of black ice. I don't know if that's out here, but just be careful driving home.
Where did you hear that?
Steve walked across the,
Where does he live?
Near Kissing Camels.
Oh, okay.
It's in the same city, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know if it was Chicago. I just heard Chicago, sheet of black ice right now.
He tells me I'm the worst driver, so.
I know. Okay, so we'll probably, what I want to do is knock out the homework now. So we're talking about what is due for next month. So this is homework for next month. Just so you're clear on what is expected. That way, you look at the list later and you're like, what the hell does that mean? Or, we don't want to do it Sunday night, because for as mushy as your brain is right now, multiply that by one more day, okay? By the way, you're building a tolerance for this. By month 4, month 5, this won't be as exhausting, okay? You're building new muscles in your brain of learning and education. Trust me, I've been in your seat. I know what you're going through. And then I do want to quickly review the sadhana about 10 more times. No, just one more time. Okay, so the homework for tomorrow. Here we go. For next month, pardon me, excuse me, for March, yes. No, sir. No, there's no homework for tomorrow except for take care of yourself tonight. Eat good food, drink lots of water, and rest well. And don't try to do too much. If you're like, I gotta go for my 6-mile run tonight, don't. Amy already did. But you've been here, done that. Amy was saying this morning, what did you say about Sandy? You said you were jealous?
Oh, I just made me so emotional because I remember my first time doing it and I was like, what the F is going on? But now I know.
That's about right, yeah.
You remember that? It was like,
today I was like, this is nice.
I know.
That was the first time I did it, I was like, this sucks.
Yeah, it'll get sweet. It will get sweet, but you've got to put the work in. Okay. So over the course of this next month, you will be required to check in with your accountability buddies. Does everybody know who the group is? And have you exchanged contact information? Let's do that today before we leave, because I'm going to cut you out early, okay? So you can do that before you go. And we won't be burning the clock. Also, be prepared to show up for the mid-month, right? That is in 2 Saturdays from today at 9:30 on Zoom, correct? That's a requirement. That's expected to be there. You will have any videos that you missed from this weekend, or that you're like, tapas didn't make sense. Watch the bloody thing again, because I guarantee there were some real nuggets of wisdom in here. Not saying it was from me, but like we had some great conversation. And if you come to it with a fresh mind, I promise you will get something out of it you did not get today. Complete the February review. So I will post this on Google Classroom. It's going to be like a multiple choice thing. It's not graded in like a traditional sense. So like do it until you get them all right. So it'll be like, oh, you got 70%, do it again, right? And just keep doing it until you get them all right. Bish, bosh, bash, you're done. Even if it says it didn't turn it in, I don't care, right? It's fine. It's glitchy. Google Classroom hates my evaluations. I don't know why. It's from there. It's their software. I don't know what the problem is. So just do it. And then if you don't, I'll never know. There's your freedom. There's your agency. Okay? You're all adults. Get what you can out of this. Reading Bhagavad Gita, chapters 1 through 6. Say the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. Bhagavad Gita. This is probably the most important yogic text. So,
Have you ever emphasized the agave, or how did she say it?
Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but I feel like she does say it.
She's better at, listen to her. Her Sanskrit is less anglicized than mine. I'm sloppy with it. So, yeah. So Yoga Sutra is track 2 of 6. So this is on page something, but here are the tracks. Sutra 3. You have this in your book. Does anybody have the book? Throw it back to me, Peg. Let's see if we can really ruin this book. Slide it. Oh, yeah. Okay. The tracks are on. Man, I know they're right here. Page 236 is where it starts, the study guide. Okay, so you're going to read. 2 of 6. No. Sorry, ignore that. Not true. Please ignore everything I just said. If you go to page 236, you'll continue with track 1. Sorry, that's for our notes. It's session 2. It's book club 2 of 6. God bless. It's confusing. So you've read 1.1 through 1.16. The very next one will be where you start, and you go through 245. So you're going to read this chunk, and next chunk. There's still going to be 3 more chunks from track 1. Just read through, and this is all in your master list. If you want to reference the master list in Google Classroom, you can do that there. But if you want to just mark your book real quick, if you've got it open, it's 3.1 to 3.3, 1.30 to 1.41, and 2.28 to 245. Thank you, Peg. Oh, is everybody familiar with the yamas and niyamas? Ish? Okay, so I would like you to pick a yama and or niyama to start to work with in your practice, in your yoga off the mat. If you're a teacher, start theming with it. We're going to eventually come back and theme with it in April. So this is like a little bit further down the road, but I want you to pick one now that is like, this is going to serve me for where I'm at right now. This is going to help me with my sankalpa. This is going to help me. So for some of you, I'm guessing after today's discussion, tapas might be the one you choose. Yeah. Or maybe you're like, I am done with tapas. I never need to hear the word tapas again. But pick a yama and niyama just to focus on, just to work with. Okay. Under teaching here in your master list, there are 2 assignments. We're going to talk about the first one tomorrow, okay? So I'm not even going to say anything about that, but you have some work to do to prepare for learning to teach restorative yoga. You are going to be accountable to research an assigned restorative yoga pose. Details of what pose is assigned to you is going to be in the Google Classroom under restorative yoga. It might not be until this week that that's actually assigned to you. So don't jump the gun on that. And then after the March session, you are going to create a beginner sequence. That's just something to think about down the road. So after next month, you're going to start writing your first yoga sequence. It's going to be a beginner yoga sequence, okay? So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Questions about homework? Okay. So we're going to end with the word. Well, let's do the chant. We'll end with the word, and then before you leave, I want you to trade contact info with your accountability buddies, okay? Yeah.
Can you put the chant up? Is it somewhere?
It's in your it's in your manual. It's in the manual.
Do you know if anyone knows the chant's on?
I can tell you. Go to the table of contents, it'll show you. Crazy thing how that works. 7.2. That doesn't help. What page is that? I'm getting close. I want to be the first one. You. Oh my gosh, you beat me. Page. What page did you say? Yeah, I have a different version. It's page 147 for me, so you're probably right, Anna. Okay, well, you're just going to have to wing it today, Peg. All right. So are we clear on the assignment? Okay. Are y'all doing good?
Yes.
Question?
Wait, we're trying to find the page for.
150, I think, is what we decided. Yeah. I have 148, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood.
What's the name of this chant?
The Mahamrityunjaya. MAHA. And then MRITYUN. JAYA. Maha means great. Mrit means death. And Yunjaya means victory over. So the great victory over death. Yeah. Okay. And it's got the translation here. Do you want to know what it says? Should we just finally get into it? It's pretty funny. Okay. So it's like an honorific to, of like the energy of Shiva. It says, Om Shiva, who is fragrant and nourishes all beings. And read this in like a two kind of brain way. Like, it's not saying like you're bowing down to a god of Shiva. Like, yes, you can read it that way, but it's like Shiva is in you. Like, it's an aspect of you, right? It's like the ultimate powerful aspect of yourself. There's a fragrance that comes along with it. Like, and that's hearkening back to that olfactory sense of like how the nose is the deepest memory in us, right? So when we get that fragrance showing up, it's like, oh, my Shiva energy is coming online, right? It's kind of like when Superman changes into his thing, takes his glasses off. That energy nourishes all beings. May it sever our bondage to samsara. That's the cycling of suffering, not samskara, right? The scars. And then it uses a great metaphor. Like a cucumber severed from its vine, the bondage of its vine. And there's a great word, sukandam pushti, which actually means the peduncle of the cucumber. You know what a peduncle is? It's the part of the cucumber that connects to the vine. Okay, fun. Thus, liberate us from the fear of death by making us realize that we were never separated from our immortal nature. And that reveals a lot about yoga philosophy, right? Like this belief that like, your flesh is leased, right? Your body is out for loan. You're going to give it back someday. But the thing that embodies your body, the thing giving it life, the prana, is eternal. It's never born, will never die. And that is who you really are. So therefore, you should not be scared of death. And sometimes the obstacle of death shows up in silly ways, right? It shows up in ways of like pain. It shows up in ways of like fear of loss or attachment. Attachment is a direct result of fear of death. You know when people say, oh, I'm not scared to die, and they're addicted to something, or they're attached to a relationship, or they're stuck in harmful patterns, that is actually a byproduct of being scared of death. It's just they're just not conscious that there's a correlation. Okay, let's chant it. Mahamrichanjaya, the great victory over death. You gotta love ancient yogis. They had a flair for drama, you know? They weren't like, yeah, they went there. All right, take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Good work today. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sukandim Pushtivaranam Urvarukumiva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshiyamamritat Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sukandim Pushtivaranam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshiyamamritat. One more time with some Satkara. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sukandim Pushtivaranam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshiyamamritat. Okay, we'll let the folks online get the word going first, okay? So Ashlyn, why don't you start? Because I didn't even know you were here for like the first hour.
Mush.
What was it?
Mush.
Mush. Okay. I'm glad I didn't say what I thought you said. Tisa.
Overwhelm.
Oh, overwhelm. Oh, I'm sorry. Amy.
Tapas.
Tapas.
Calm,
Calm.
settle. Happy.
Bedtime.
Tired.
Smells like
Thirsty.
Thirsty? Dristy. Work?
Sight.
Yeah. Skype? Sky. Intense?
No. Gross.
Tisa, I got you, Tisa, right? Yeah, you said overwhelmed. Okay. I'm gonna say Sattva. Because trust me, you keep doing this work, eventually you will get Sattva. Right now, you're the furthest thing from Sattva. Just know this is the opposite of Sattva. If you want to know what Sattva is, this is not Sattva. Okay. Exchange your contact info. Go home. Take care of yourself. Have a great night. Hope you feel better, Tisa. Ashlyn, I hope you can join us tomorrow in person. And we'll see you all in the morning. What time?
4:07.
There you go. Yeah.
So
Hi, guys.
I couldn't get out of morning work.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm probably
That's
not gonna
good.
be able to come in until about